LoveLore Library. Chapter 87. Your Majesty, just treat this as a little secret of mine. Shin Yu raised his head and looked at Shang Junlin from head to toe. A secret, just like any other secret that your Majesty has not delved into before. Yu also knows that he has hidden many things from Jin. Shang Junlin lowered his head and kissed Shin Yu's forehead. He said dotingly, "All right, Jin will not delve into it. Jin will wait for the day when you are willing to tell Jin in person." Shin Yu had already been marked as his. He had enough time to wait for Shin Yu to take the initiative to open his heart. Shang Junlin sat down next to Shin Yu and carefully read the contents. Even De Huan doesn't have these things. Is it difficult to make them? It's not difficult. Shin Yu gave them to me together with some recipes. It's just that these things are not easy for the imperial court to promote. Shin Yu took out another stack of paper. On it was a detailed production process written by Shin Yu. You can handle these things. If you lack people or anything else, just tell Jin directly. You have given Jin enough things. Just keep these things in your hands. Shang Junlin hugged Shin Yu's waist. He thought of the things that Shin Yu had taken out before. Compared to those things, the things that Shin Yu gave were more suitable for personal use. That's fine, Shin Yu didn't refuse. After all, what's mine is also your Majesty's. Most of the things that Shin Yu gave were things that would be popular with women. For example, lipstick, soap, face coverings. Shin Yu sorted these things out and found something that interested him. Alcohol. A certain amount of alcohol could be used to disinfect. Shin Yu remembered that the books said that in the world before Shin Qingran's time travel, medical skills were very advanced. Shin Qingran himself also said that many diseases that could kill people in this dynasty could be easily cured in his time. Your Majesty, this thing may be used in the army. Shin Yu took out the recipe for alcohol. If the alcohol mentioned here can be made, it can reduce many unnecessary casualties on the battlefield. Shang Junlin put down the memorial in his hand and came over with interest. Alcohol. Is it alcohol? Alcohol has this kind of effect. It's a kind of alcohol, but it's not the kind we usually drink. The production method is written here. Your Majesty, take a look. Shang Junlin handed the recipe to Shang Junlin. Shang Junlin looked at the two lines and frowned slightly. It was written in detail, but there were some words he had never heard of before. For example, distillation, purification, dilution. Your Majesty, do you want to summon Shin Yu and ask her about it? Yu also doesn't know about this. Your Majesty, do you really think I'm omnipotent? Shin Yu's eyebrows curved. I also don't understand these things. Shin Yu thought that Shin Yu was also a time traveler like her, so she directly wrote according to the words of her previous life. If she didn't have a part of the original owner's memory, knew how to write De Huan characters, and was afraid that writing modern simplified characters would cause trouble, she wouldn't use De Huan characters to write these things. Although the content wasn't much, she still stumbled a few days to finish writing. Thanks to her previous life, she loved to read novels. She could more or less remember some of the necessary skills for time travel. After giving the things to Shin Yu was very nervous. She didn't know if these things were useful to Shin Yu. If Shin Yu felt that they weren't useful, what should she do? Fortunately, she didn't have to wait long before Yuzhang Palace sent someone to summon her. The little eunuch leading the way was still the same one, and his attitude towards her was much warmer. Shin Yu's heart calmed down a little. The little eunuch led her to the main hall and quietly retreated. Shin Yu composed herself and greeted Shin Yu and Shang Junlin. No need to be so polite. If Shin Yu was willing, he could give people a very amiable feeling. Today, I called you to ask you about alcohol. Shin Yu guessed a little. She heard a lot about the current emperor from Imperial Concubine Dowager and knew that he had fought on the battlefield. She also thought about it before writing in alcohol. Although it was easy to make medical alcohol in modern times, it was because modern times had all kinds of precision instruments. De Juan didn't have anything. To make alcohol, the corresponding equipment must be made first. Do you have any ideas about purification and dilution? Actually, we can directly use baijiu to purify the alcohol we want, but the premise is that we need to know the alcohol content of the baijiu. I'm not sure what the alcohol content of the alcohol here is, so we can only choose another method. First, we need to get pure alcohol, then we need to dilute it with water. There were many words that didn't belong to De Juan. Shenyu lowered his eyes. Can you make it? If there is the corresponding equipment, I can. Shenyu knew this because there was a time when she was obsessed with reading novels. She always imagined that one day she could travel through time and learned a lot of things that were easy to learn. For example, making soap, perfume, and so on. When it came to perfume, alcohol was needed. Describe in detail what you need. Jen will have someone make it for you, Shang Junlin said in a deep voice. Shen Yu searched through the memories of the original owner and found that De Juan already had glass, but it was still far from the kind she wanted. Replying to Your Majesty, what this servant wants needs to be made with colored glass, but it will be different from the colored glass on the market now. It needs to be transparent. This servant knows how to make transparent colored glass, so I will write it down. Shen Yu tried hard to recall the memories in her mind. Oh right, about the alcohol that this servant wants, it must be strictly mixed in proportion to reduce the effect of wound infection. Shen understands. The palace servant brought a pen and paper and led Shen Yu to the side hall. Your Majesty, why don't you set up an independent department to research these novel things? We can't let the Ministry of Works do everything. The independent department will be directly under Your Majesty and won't be interfered with by any forces. After all, the Ministry of Works belonged to De Juan. There were many people there, so it was indeed inconvenient to put some things there to research. Shang Junlin thought for a moment and said, Ayu's words make sense. Shen Yu went to the side hall and wrote down all the ideas she could think of. She also drew simple diagrams of the beakers and distillation bottles made of transparent glass. After finishing everything, Shen Yu looked at the results of her hard work for half a day. She sighed in her heart, I didn't expect that I would really encounter time travel. The things that I learned because of my unspeakable thoughts and was scolded for being useless could really be used one day. When Shen Yu came out with the things, she only saw Shen Yu. The young man in blue stood by the window with his back to her. His temperament was exactly the same as the young master of an ancient aristocratic family that Shen Yu imagined. Did he really time travel from the modern era like her? Shen Yu couldn't help but think. Shen Yu turned around and saw the doubts in Shen Yu's eyes. He said, Do you have something to ask me? There were palace servants in the room, and Shen Yu was more cautious than before. She didn't want to talk about time travel directly. She only asked vaguely, Why is His Highness willing to give this opportunity to me? Shen Yu knew that she would be suspicious, so he had already thought of an excuse. My health wasn't good in the past, so I rarely went out. My family was strict and didn't let me do many things. If I knew what you said, would have taken it out long ago. After saying this, Shen Yu sighed lightly. Shen Yu thought that she had touched his sore spot. She bit her lips and said, I'm sorry. There's nothing to apologize for. Shen Yu changed the topic. Do you want to take a look at the newly built cement road? Can I go? Shen Yu certainly wanted to. Not to mention other things, just the fact that she could leave the palace was already very tempting to her. Seeing the hidden expectation in Shen Yu's eyes, Shen Yu slightly curved his lips. Of course you can. When I arrange it, I will send someone to call you to consort dowager. Then can I walk around the other places in the capital? Shen Yu's mind was full of thoughts about leaving the palace. How could she still remember her doubts about Shen Yu? Besides, the cement road in Dahuan had already been built. She didn't need to doubt this and that. Wasn't Xinyu willing to help her because they came from the same place? Thinking of this, Xinyu felt a little ashamed of her doubts. She secretly made up her mind to do something useful as soon as possible to repay Xinyu's kindness. Yes, I will give you free time. If you are worried that you are not familiar with the capital, I can also let Mu Shi accompany you to walk around. Yes, yes. Xinyu's happiness was beyond words. After returning to Consort Dowager's palace, Consort Dowager saw it at a glance. Consort Dowager called her, "What made you so happy?" "Guijun promised to take me out of the palace. I haven't had a good look at the capital yet." Xinyu's eyes were full of yearning. What would the place that carried her second life look like? Out of the palace, Consort Dowager's eyes were in a trance for a moment. It's good to go out and have a look. Fong Rong, give Xinyu some money. Go out and have fun, but remember not to cause trouble for Guijun. Consort Dowager didn't suspect anything. There were many palace maids in the palace who entered the palace at a young age. They came from all over Dahuan and might not even have seen the entire capital. It was normal for them to yearn for the outside. I will. Xinyu nodded solemnly. The women's products that Xinyu gave were not difficult to make. Xinyu had many shops under his control. After the finished products were made, they could be sold in the shops. Your Majesty, has Miss Fong's official position been decided today? This matter had been delayed for more than 10 days. Today was the deadline. Shang Junlin wanted Fong Jia to enter the Hanlin Academy through the normal procedures, but the aristocratic families refused. Most of the official positions that they proposed were not important. Their meaning was obvious. They just needed to find an unimportant position to support her. It's been decided. Just like in previous years, she will enter the Hanlin Academy with Jiang Huiqing and He Qingyu. Shang Junlin put down the pen in his hand and rubbed his eyebrows. As for the aristocratic families like the Yi family, in view of the fact that this was a mistake made by the younger generation, we will only punish the person who made the mistake. What about Yi Jianming? Xinyu walked behind Shang Junlin and massaged his temples. He personally experienced how much thought Shang Junlin had put into this matter. Cancel the results this time as a warning to others. This was the result after the aristocratic families had to take a step back. It seems that Your Majesty has won this time. After so long, the dust has finally settled. Congratulations, Your Majesty. Although there were still many problems to face in the future, at least the first step was successfully taken. As for Fong Jia's future development, it all depended on her. How does you plan to congratulate me? Shang Junlin grabbed Xinyu's hand and pulled him in front of him. He hugged him on his lap and intimately whispered in his ear, "Speaking of which, this suggestion was made by you. Shouldn't there be a reward for fulfilling a Yu's wish?" Chapter 88. Xinyu looked at Shang Junlin speechlessly. He found that Shang Junlin liked to ask for rewards from him more and more. No, it was more accurate to say that he was asking for rewards than being intimate. Shang Junlin didn't really want anything. He just wanted Xinyu to take the initiative. Xinyu let go of Shang Junlin's hand on his forehead and slowly moved it away. Your Majesty, what reward do you want? You will take the initiative to kiss me. Shang Junlin said reservedly. Of course, what he really wanted was more than just a kiss. But he also knew that he couldn't tease Xinyu too much. Otherwise, he wouldn't get anything. Or you will let me kiss you. Your Majesty, you want to do more than that, right? Xinyu glanced at him. He knew that this would be the result. Of course, if you is willing to do more, I will be very happy. Shang Junlin's hand on Xinyu's waist slid down meaningfully. Shin held down the man's hand that kept moving down. It's clearly your Majesty's business. Why does it seem like you're doing it for me? Doesn't you miss you? Shang Junlin pulled the person who was about to move out of his arms back. He put his head on Shin Yu's shoulder and asked in a hoarse voice. I think about you all the time. Will you miss me? Your Majesty. Shin Yu's breath was unstable. Let go of me. You also likes. The rest of the voice disappeared in the kiss. The candlelight flickered and two intertwined figures were reflected on the ground. Occasionally, a few murmurs could be heard and disappeared in mid-air. In the end, Shang Junlin was satisfied that he got the reward he wanted. Shin Yu was half lying on the bed and was about to fall asleep. It was already late. Shin Yu had been taking calming pills all this time. It was already past his bedtime, and he was extremely sleepy. Shang Junlin did not bother him anymore. He called for hot water and washed Shin Yu. Then, he carried him to the bed and planted a kiss on his forehead. Sleep. Your Majesty, aren't you going to sleep now? Shin Yu grabbed the sleeve of the person who was about to leave. Jin will come after changing my clothes. You sleep first, Shang Junlin coaxed gently. Shin Yu vaguely realized that Shang Junlin was indeed wearing court attire. He slowly let go of his hand and stared at Shang Junlin while resisting the drowsiness. Shang Junlin's heart softened. He quickly changed his clothes, lifted the quilt, and held Shin Yu in his arms. He patted him on the back and said, Sleep. Yes. His eyelids became heavier and heavier. Shin Yu finally couldn't resist and closed his eyes, falling into a deep sleep. Shang Junlin stared at the peaceful sleeping face of the person in his arms. His eyes were filled with darkness. He thought of what Imperial Physician Gu said to him during the day. Shin Yu's illness seemed to be a deficiency disease, but in fact, there was something else. In other words, Shin Yu's current physical condition was likely caused by someone. Shang Junlin's heart was filled with anger. Deficiency disease was innate and could not be changed. But he never thought that it was caused by someone. The suffering that his Yu had suffered since she was young might have been caused by someone. As long as he thought of this, he couldn't stop the violence in his heart. Shin Yu seemed to feel that Shang Junlin's breath was not right. He moved uneasily in the man's arms. Shang Junlin restrained his breath, pulled the person into his arms, and kissed the forehead of the person in his arms to comfort him. Shin Yu found a comfortable position and didn't move. It was a dreamless night. When he woke up, the sky was already bright. There was no familiar breath around him. He thought that the person had gone to court. He rubbed the pillow and slowly sat up. Young master, are you awake? Mu Shi, who had been waiting outside, heard the noise and asked. Yes. Hearing the answer, Mu Shi came in with clean clothes and helped Shin Yu to dress. Shin Yu lowered his head and tidied up his sleeves. This was the best sleep he had ever had since he dreamed of Prince Yu. Thinking about the difference from the previous days, it seemed that there was only one thing. Could it be that doing that thing could really help him sleep? Shin Yu couldn't help but wonder. After washing up, Mu Shi asked the small kitchen to serve breakfast. It was all Shin Yu's favorite dishes. Perhaps because he had enough sleep, Shin Yu ate half a bowl more than usual. After breakfast, Imperial Physician Gu came to check his pulse. Because of the abnormal pulse last time, Imperial Physician Gu came almost every day recently. Your pulse has returned to normal. Your Highness is fine. Imperial Physician Gu remembered Shang Junlin's instructions. He didn't reveal anything about Shin Yu's condition. Shin Yu thought of today's abnormality and decided to ask a professional, Imperial Physician Gu. Compared to a few days ago, I slept exceptionally well last night. I want to ask, is it because of the sedative medicine or something else? Logically speaking, the prescription I prescribed should take effect on the day you take the medicine. Did your highness do anything last night or before that? Is there something different? Imperial physician Gu was very confident about the medicine he prescribed. There's nothing different. The only difference is that I fooled around with His Majesty. Imperial physician Gu, do you think there is any connection between the two? When Shin Yu's voice fell, Mushi blushed. She knew that His Majesty asked for hot water last night. When His Majesty left this morning, he specifically told them not to disturb His Highness's rest. After being in the palace for several months, Mushi was now very clear about what this meant. Imperial physician Gu was stunned for a moment, and then he realized what Shin Yu meant by fooling around. After a moment of contemplation, he said, "It may be partly because after the energy is released, people will be more tired and more likely to fall into a deep sleep. So there is such a saying." Shin Yu blinked. It seemed that Shang Junlin made fun of him last night by a fluke. Imperial physician Gu adjusted the original prescription according to Shin Yu's pulse before leaving. After walking out of Yuzhang Palace for a while, eunuch Meng, who had been waiting here for a long time, greeted him. "His Majesty has been waiting for a long time." Imperial physician Gu, please follow me. Imperial physician Gu was used to being called away by the emperor when he left Yuzhang Palace. He tidied up his clothes and followed eunuch Meng to see Shang Junlin. "How is His Highness's condition?" Seeing Imperial physician Gu, Shang Junlin raised his head from a pile of waiting memorials. "Replying to Your Majesty, His Highness's condition is very good, and his pulse has returned to normal. You said last time that His Highness's pulse is strange. Have you found out the reason?" Shang Junlin was very concerned about the conjecture that Imperial physician Gu once raised about Shin Yu's condition. "Imperial physician Gu, the change is too subtle. If I am not very familiar with His Highness's pulse, I may not be able to detect the change. This time, I noticed that His Highness's pulse has returned to normal little by little. Forgive me for not being good enough, I can't determine the reason for this change for the time being." Shang Junlin, what you said last time was not a natural deficiency, Imperial physician Gu, it's just my conjecture. If it's really not a natural deficiency, then it's easy to explain. There are very few cases of natural deficiency that can be cured. If there is a hidden reason, I will have more confidence to cure His Highness if I find the cause. Shang Junlin, I'll have to trouble Imperial physician Gu with this matter. This is my duty, Your Majesty doesn't need to thank me. Imperial physician Gu remembered what Shin Yu said just now and hesitated. Today, His Highness asked some questions, but I haven't gotten the answer yet. Please pay more attention. After which, he recounted the conversation he had with Shin Yu in Yuzhang Palace. Shang Junlin, I've been worried that this matter will hurt a Yu's body, so I didn't dare to do too much. Does Imperial physician Gu mean that it's appropriate? Imperial physician Gu, His Highness's body is recuperating well. As long as it's not too much, there won't be any problems. Shang Junlin, the ointment that Imperial physician Gu gave to a Yu last time is good. You can make more. Imperial physician Gu. This subject accepts the decree. Shang Junlin was in a good mood when he heard that Shin Yu was fine. He rewarded Imperial physician Gu with a bunch of things and asked eunuch Meng to send him back. Imperial physician Gu was sent back to the Gu residence by a carriage from the palace. There was a row of gifts behind the carriage, and the people on the street all stopped to watch. Hearing the commotion outside, Gu Huai walked out and saw Imperial physician Gu coming down from the palace's specially made carriage. There were several carriages behind the carriage. It's a gift from His Majesty. Imperial physician Gu got down from the carriage and replied to Gu Huai. He turned to eunuch Meng and said, I'll have to trouble eunuch Meng. It's nothing. Imperial physician Gu deserves it. After the people from the palace left, Gu Huai helped to organize the gifts and said, "Brother, you're so awesome. You received so many gifts. It's all because His Majesty and His Highness are good people. Some of these gifts were given by Shang Junlin, and some were given by Yuzhang Palace." Knowing Imperial Physician Gu's preferences, most of these gifts could be used by him. Is Guizhuan's health better? It's no big deal. Imperial Physician Gu rubbed the young man's head. Don't worry, I'll be fine. After organizing the gifts, Imperial Physician Gu took out the ingredients for making ointment. He planned to make more. His Majesty only had Guizhuan in his harem, so there would be a lot of demand. Speaking of ointment, he learned how to make a living when he first entered the Imperial Academy of Medicine. At that time, Gu Huai was seriously ill and needed all kinds of expensive herbs. In order to cure him, he took a lot of work outside. The boss of the medicine shop that he often went to helped him a lot. When he found out that he was short of money, he told him that he could make money quickly by making ointment. The truth was, the ointment with aphrodisiac effects was very popular. Later, when he was not so short of money, he did not make ointment anymore. The main reason was that he was shy and did not want his children to know that he was making ointment. At that time, he sold the ointment through someone else. The boss of the medicine shop helped him sell the ointment and did not show up the whole time. He made ointment for Xinyu because Xinyu's physical condition was special. Since he took over, he had to do his best. His Majesty's needs were high. It was not easy for a man to provide pleasure, and Guizhuan's health was not good. If he was often injured because of this, it would have a great impact on his health. Today, His Majesty mentioned it again. Imperial Physician Gu thought of the amount that was sent to Yuzhang Palace last time. It was not a lot, but it was definitely not a small amount. Should he remind His Majesty to let His Majesty rest more? Imperial Physician Gu sighed. He was just a doctor. Why did he have to worry about His Majesty's bedroom matters? He put the boiled ointment into a box to cool down. Imperial Physician Gu took the prepared flower juice and added it. He was so focused on making the ointment that he did not notice that Gu Huai had entered the room. Gu Huai was very interested in everything about Imperial Physician Gu. When he saw the row of transparent ointment, he picked up one of them and walked behind Imperial Physician Gu. "Brother, what is this?" Imperial Physician Gu was startled by the sudden voice and loosened his grip. Fortunately, Gu Huai had sharp eyes and quick hands and did not let the ointment fall. "Why did you come in?" Imperial Physician Gu composed himself and turned around to see Gu Huai holding the ointment that he had made halfway. His eyes were full of curiosity. Imperial Physician Gu's face turned red. Chapter 89. How was he going to explain to Gu Huai what the ointment was used for? Imperial Physician Gu took the box from Gu Huai's hands with a red face and put it aside. As if realizing his mistake, Gu Huai lowered his head and said in a low voice, "I'm sorry, brother. I didn't know I couldn't touch it." Imperial Physician Gu was amenable to persuasion but not coercion. Seeing Gu Huai lower his head and admit his mistake, he couldn't blame him. He couldn't help but rub the youth's head. "It's fine. It's just that this ointment is for Guizhuan. Children shouldn't touch things used by adults. I'm not a child anymore, brother." Gu Huai sighed in his heart. He was about to turn 18, but Imperial Physician Gu still treated him like a child. It was true that he enjoyed being doted on by Imperial Physician Gu, but he didn't want to be treated like a child forever. He had already grown up and was no longer the child who could only be trampled on. He could also shelter his brother from the wind and rain and hold up the sky. "I know you've already grown up. All right, go out and play. I'm almost done here." Seeing his firm attitude, Gu Huai didn't want to make Imperial Physician Gu angry and obediently left. However, he was still curious about what Imperial Physician Gu had made and why his face had turned red when he asked. After Gu Huai left, he called for his subordinate and described the ointment he saw in detail. He asked, "Do you know what this is?" The subordinate paused and hesitated. "It seems to be used by men to lubricate themselves when they're having fun." After saying that, the subordinate quickly added, "Of course, this is only my wild guess. It might not be the real thing." Gu Huai was silent. When he thought of Imperial Physician Gu's face turning red when he asked about it, how could he not be sure? It was most likely what his subordinate said. When did his brother learn how to make this kind of thing? Based on his brother's proficiency, it clearly wasn't his first time. Gu Huai carefully recalled their interactions over the years and tried to find clues from his memories. Imperial Physician Gu still didn't know that his secret was about to be exposed. He calmed down and finished the last step. He took out a small jade bottle and filled it with the ointment. Looking at the ointment, Imperial Physician Gu let out a long sigh of relief. The portion she made this time should be enough to last her for a while. Next time, she should find another place to make it. It would be too embarrassing if Gu Huai saw her making it at home. The finished ointment was quickly delivered to Shang Junlin. Shang Junlin put it away and placed it in the drawer beside the bed. "What is your Majesty doing?" Shen Yu had just finished watering the flowers and plants outside. When he walked in, he saw Shang Junlin bending over the bed and doing something. Shang Junlin stood up straight, turned around and walked toward Shen Yu. "Didn't Imperial Physician Gu almost run out of the cosmetics he sent last time? He sent some more. Did His Majesty squeeze him to do it?" Shen Yu saw through him. He is a good Imperial physician. Why does His Majesty keep making him do this kind of thing? This is also for a Yu's health. Shang Junlin had his own reasons. Imperial Physician Gu is helping a Yu to nurse her body. Naturally, he has to take care of all aspects. If His Majesty didn't force me to do it, he wouldn't need these things, Shen Yu said angrily. Ever since the last time, Shang Junlin always liked to force him to do it. Although he didn't finish it, he was able to satisfy Shang Junlin's craving. All the court officials could feel that the emperor was in a good mood recently. The aristocratic officials thought that Shang Junlin was in a good mood because he beat them in the matter of women becoming officials. They were unhappy, but they couldn't show it. This made them very upset for a while. Other than them, the other officials all hoped that Shang Junlin's good mood could last for a while longer. He Qingyu, Jiang Huiqing, and Fang Jia had all entered the Hanlin Academy. Even if the others were unhappy, they couldn't say anything now that the matter had been settled. Fang Jia's essay was circulated among the students. Other than a few people who had a strong prejudice against women, the rest of the students didn't have any doubts about Fang Jia taking second place in the imperial examinations. Seeing that there was no movement outside, the aristocratic officials were furious. Of course, they wouldn't let the matter rest. They bribed a few students to talk about the disadvantages of women becoming officials. They were attacked by the other students and could only leave the matter unsettled. Luckily, Yu predicted this in advance. Otherwise, there would be trouble. Shang Junlin was holding the secret letter that the hidden dragon guards had just presented to him. He was in a good mood and the corners of his lips curled up. What happened? Shen Yu brewed tea for the two of them and pushed one of the cups in front of Shang Junlin. The aristocratic families really sent people to stir up trouble among the students. We prepared in advance and didn't cause any trouble. Take a look. Shang Junlin handed the secret letter to Shen Yu. Shen Yu opened it and read 10 lines at a glance. They underestimated the power of the poor too much. They also didn't understand what the most important thing in the hearts of these scholars who haven't stepped into the officialdom. They haven't been tainted by the fame and fortune of the officialdom, so their hearts have their own gullies. They also have a lot of ambition. Shen Yu had dealt with these people a lot in his previous life. In the eyes of the officialdom, they might be simple and easy to use. However, if you thought that they were stupid and could be manipulated, you would be wrong. When it comes to the matters of the imperial court, it's easy to distort the truth by word of mouth. I have to think of a way to let every place in Dahuan know the exact situation of the imperial court. Shen Yu lowered his eyes and pondered. In his previous life, Shang Junlin's reputation had become like that. On one hand, it was because of King Yu and the others. On the other hand, it was because there was a huge gap in information between the imperial court and the local government. There was no way to spread the news of what Shang Junlin had done to the local government. The news that they received was what others wanted them to hear. Is you talking about the imperial court bulletin? Yes, but not all of it. It needs to be more detailed. Not only will the local government know about the various decisions and measures made by the imperial court, but the imperial court will also know about the local government situation. In his previous life, Shen Yu had an information network that covered almost all of Dahuan. However, it was different from the one he proposed today. This idea was inspired by Shen Yu. If they could exchange information and reduce the time difference, it would be more beneficial for the imperial court to control the local government. What does you think? Shang Junlin thought deeply for a while and felt that this method was indeed beneficial. Your Majesty can discuss with the ministers, but you can't squeeze me for everything. Shen Yu rested his chin on his hands and looked at Shang Junlin with a smile. You. Shang Junlin was helpless. Fine, I will discuss with the Prime Minister and the others first. After the discussion comes to a conclusion, you can see if there is anything that can be changed. The Prime Minister and the others are much better than me. Shen Yu only cared about the idea and didn't want to worry about how to implement it. The ministers in the imperial court knew enough about Dahuan. With Shang Junlin's supervision, the final method wouldn't be wrong. Shang Junlin saw that he didn't want to participate too much and didn't force him. He was willing to satisfy you no matter what kind of life he wanted to live. Your Majesty, many flowers have bloomed in the imperial garden. Let's go and enjoy the flowers. The thing Shen Yu did the most every day when he saw Shang Junlin was reviewing reports. It was rare for the weather to be good recently. In a few days, it would be hot. He wanted to take advantage of the weather to walk outside more. Imperial physician Gu also said that you should walk more. Shang Junlin didn't have any objections. He put away the things and took Shen Yu out. The evening sun shone on people's bodies, making them feel warm and fuzzy. Shen Yu narrowed his eyes in satisfaction. All kinds of flowers bloomed in the imperial garden. Colorful flowers dotted the sea of green, competing with each other in terms of beauty. It was too beautiful to behold. The fragrance of the flowers was carried by the breeze. Shen Yu pulled Shang Junlin's sleeve. Your Majesty, how many kinds of flowers are there? Almost all the flowers in Dahuan that can survive in the capital are here. See if there is anything you like. I will ask Meng Chang to bring some to you. Shang Junlin was not interested in flowers and plants. The flowers and plants in the palace had always been taken care of by the palace servants. Shen Yu walked and stopped. Occasionally, when he saw something he liked, he would stop for a while. The more fragrant the flowers were, the more it attracted a few butterflies. Don't you know that the flowers here can't be picked? You have already picked a basket of flowers. Who asked you to come here? Shang Junlin frowned when he heard a noise in front of him. Eunuch Meng quickly walked over. This servant will go and take a look. After a while, Eunuch Meng came back. Shen Yu came to pick flowers. She was seen by the steward auntie who passed by and was reprimanded. Shen Yu, who was about to leave, stopped. Shen Yu. Why did she come to the imperial garden? As he spoke, he walked in the direction of the sound. What happened? The man's majestic voice sounded. The palace servants all knelt down. The slightly older palace servant saluted and said, "Replying to your majesty, this palace maid may not know the rules here and pick some flowers. This servant has already reprimanded her. She didn't know that Shin Yu knew them. She was afraid that she would lose her life because of a small matter, so she subconsciously protected her." Shin Yu looked at the palace maid who had just reprimanded her in surprise. She hurriedly bowed her head and admitted her mistake. "You can leave first." "You stay." Shin Yu pointed to Shin Yu. The palace maid looked at Shin Yu before leaving. She wanted to say something, but was pulled away by eunuch Meng. "Get up. Why did you pick these flowers?" Shin Yu asked. This servant wanted to make flower cakes for the old imperial concubine. "I looked for the best place with flowers and found this place. I didn't notice that the flowers here can't be picked." This servant knows her mistake. "I'll forgive you for your first offense." "Forget it." Shin Yu looked at the basket of flowers beside her and curiously asked, "You used flowers to make food directly?" "Not only flowers. If you are interested in pies made with flowers, this servant will send some to Yuzhong Palace after this servant makes them." Shin Yu lowered her head. In fact, she was also in the experimental stage. She wasn't sure if the pies she made would be delicious. Shin Yu was in a good mood when she walked around the imperial garden on a whim and got a new snack. After walking around, she returned to Yuzhong Palace. The small kitchen had already prepared the meal. Shang Junlin said that if anyone could satisfy the noble lord, he would be heavily rewarded. Because of this sentence, the people in the small kitchen tried different ways to make delicious food every day. Shin Yu had a good appetite recently. She ate more than when she first came to the palace. The loss of her last illness was finally slowly made up. She also gained some weight. Shang Junlin felt good when he hugged her. Shang Junlin was relieved that she finally recovered a little. After the last illness, Shin Yu's appetite greatly decreased. Seeing that she was getting thinner and thinner, Shang Junlin was distressed. However, there was nothing he could do. He could only instruct the small kitchen to be more careful and think of ways to let Shin Yu eat more. Imperial physician Gu didn't recommend eating too much nourishment such as bird's nest. The body that had been damaged for a long time couldn't bear too much nourishment. It could only be nourished a little. Shin Yu also didn't like to eat these nourishing foods. Shang Junlin simply fed her every 10 days. "Am I eating more now than before? Will I become fat if I continue to eat like this?" At night, Shin Yu lay in Shang Junlin's arms. She frowned as she recalled her recent appetite. "How is you fat?" Shang Junlin held Shin Yu's wrist and pinched it. "You don't have much meat." Shin Yu looked at his wrist. It was a strong contrast with Shang Junlin's. The latter's wrist was strong and strong, while his was white and thin. He didn't have much meat. He turned around and lay face to face in Shang Junlin's arms. As he moved, Shang Junlin's inner garment was pushed aside, revealing half of his chest. Shang Junlin's body was covered with a layer of well-proportioned muscles. It was just right and didn't appear exaggerated. When he wore clothes, it couldn't be seen. When there was no clothes covering, one could see the smooth lines of his muscles. Shin Yu didn't have much muscle. Because of his body, his flesh was soft in both lifetimes. He was a little envious of Shang Junlin. However, he didn't know that Shang Junlin loved every part of him. Shin Yu poked Shang Junlin's firm muscles. "Your Majesty is still the best. If you likes, you can look and touch as much as you want." Shang Junlin let go of Shin Yu's hand and pressed the hand that was roaming around his body to his chest. His other hand wrapped around Shin Yu's waist. He said meaningfully, Jin loves every part of a Yu's body. Chapter 90. The atmosphere instantly became ambiguous. Shin Yu was on top of Shang Junlin. He looked down at the man lying under him, and an inexplicable emotion flashed through his eyes. Shin Yu pressed her hand on the man's chest. She could feel his steady and powerful heartbeat through her palm. She moved her fingers. Yu, do you want to touch it? Shang Junlin coaxed in a low voice. Without waiting for Shin Yu's answer, he took his hand and explored it bit by bit. Shin Yu pursed his lips, and his fingers curled up slightly. Shin Yu couldn't help but stare at Shang Junlin. Your Majesty's words are like gold. We agreed that we wouldn't do anything today. Shang Junlin didn't intend to do anything, but with a beauty in his arms, he couldn't help but be tempted. When he saw Shin Yu's complaining eyes, he had to give up. Okay, I won't disturb you today. If you're tired, you can rest. Shin Yu looked at him suspiciously. The meaning in his eyes was obvious. It was as if he was asking, why are you so easy to talk to today? Shang Junlin covered his eyes. Don't look at me like that. I'm afraid that I won't be able to control myself. When a man's interest was aroused and he had a sweetheart in his arms, it was difficult to control himself. Since Shang Junlin said that, it seemed that he really didn't intend to do anything. Shin Yu relaxed and fell on the man's body, closing his eyes. He was indeed sleepy. If your Majesty likes it, you can touch it. Before going to sleep, Shin Yu whispered. As soon as his voice fell, Shin Yu felt his waist tighten. The man whispered in his ear, Yu, are you deliberately not letting me sleep? Shin Yu rubbed the man's chest and didn't say anything. Shang Junlin waited for a long time, but only heard the sound of the young man's steady breathing. He looked at the bed curtain above his head and smiled bitterly. He wanted to get up to relieve himself, but Shin Yu was clinging onto him and frowned every time he moved. Shang Junlin had no choice but to wait until Shin Yu was fast asleep before he slowly got off the bed. Shang Junlin came back with a chill. He was afraid that the chill would spread to Shin Yu, so he didn't immediately lie down on the bed. Instead, he sat on the edge of the bed and traced the young man's facial features with his fingers. I really don't know if you did it on purpose or not. Even if he did it on purpose, he couldn't do anything to Shin Yu. Shin Yu had a good night's sleep. When she woke up the next day, she found herself firmly held in someone's arms. The familiar cold scent of the man lingered at the tip of her nose, and her Shin Yu moved. Yu is awake. The man's deep voice came from the top of her head. Shin Yu softly said, oh. Shin Yu, who had just woken up, was still a little confused and slow to react to everything. She didn't even feel the man's hand reaching into her clothes. Shang Junlin carelessly stroked Shin Yu's warm skin under his palm. It was rare to see such an obedient and soft side of Shin Yu. He deeply felt that he had missed a lot because of the morning court. Shin Yu half opened her eyes for a while, and her thoughts came back little by little. Why didn't His Majesty go to the morning court today? I wanted to stay with Yu today. Shin Yu propped herself up and looked at the sky outside. There was no sunlight and it was very dark, so the entire bedchamber was dusky. Is it raining outside? It rained for a while, but it has stopped now. Shang Junlin pressed her back into his arms and wrapped her in the quilt. It's a little cold today, don't catch a cold. Shang Junlin actually went to the morning court, but when he saw that the weather was not right, he was worried about Shin Yu, who was alone in Yuzhang Palace, so he hurriedly finished the morning court and came back to accompany him. He still had lingering fears about Shin Yu's nightmare last time. He thought that if Shin Yu had a nightmare this time, at least he would be by his side. Shin Yu was in a daze for a while. When she was completely awake, she got out of bed. Shang Junlin didn't leave Yuzhang Palace for the whole day. During the time, there were ministers who asked to see him, but he refused. Shen Yu handed the prescription given by Shen Yu to his subordinates. Not long after, they made the finished product and sent the news through Mu Shi. So fast. Shen Yu was surprised. This servant was also surprised. They even sent the finished product. Mu Shi held a small box and opened it for Shen Yu to see. The things in the box were smaller than those made by Shen Yu, but they were made in various shapes. They looked more delicate and pleasant. At first glance, it was obvious that the women would like them. Like this, Shen Yu picked up one of them. How many can you make in a day? A skilled worker can make about 20 to 30. Shen Yu played with the small wooden box in his hand. There were enough people in the manor for the time being, so they could put it in the shop to test the water first. Let them make a batch first. They don't need too many. Put them in the shop in the north of the city to sell. Only a certain amount will be sold every day. It's first come, first served. Let me think about the rest. Yes. The things made in the manor were first sent to Shen Yu. Shen Yu picked some that could be used. The rest that were suitable for women were given to the palace maids in Yuzhang Palace. Some were sent to the palace of concubine dowager. Did you go to the jewelry shop in the north of the city? They recently launched some new products. Not only do they look pleasant, but they also work well. Are you talking about soap in various shapes? I asked my brother to buy one for me. It's really good to use it to wash my hands. It smells good after washing. There's also their new lipstick. Look, I used it today. Doesn't it look better than the previous one? Wow, it's true. This color suits you very well. I think so too. Their lipstick has many colors. I have decided to buy it there in the future. Considering some problems, Shen Yu only let the shop sell lipstick and soap to the outside for the time being. These two things were relatively simple to make. Young master, Mu Shi came in with the account book. Many customers want to sell more. The shopkeeper wrote a letter to ask if we should increase the daily sales. Ask them if they can do it. If they can, we can increase it appropriately. Shen Yu opened the account book and looked at it. To be honest, the results were far beyond his expectations. In just a few days, the profit of the soap and lipstick was more than the sum of the other products. The business of this shop had not been very good. With the two new products, soap and lipstick, it became the most popular jewelry shop among women. I didn't expect it to sell so well at such a price. Shen Yu sighed. Considering the uniqueness of the products and the difficulty of making them, Shen Yu set the price for these two products not cheap. Originally, he limited the daily sales because he was afraid that they would not be able to sell out. Unexpectedly, the opposite happened. Not to mention the young ladies outside, there are also many people in the palace who want to buy some back. Young master, don't underestimate the purchasing power of women. Mu Shi said with a smile. I was wrong. You can let them do as they see fit. Shen Yu had people who were responsible for taking care of the shop. He did not need to worry about these things. Before the arrival of summer, the Ministry of Works had developed more uses for the cement and put them into practice one by one. Shen Yu knew that it would take some time to really use this material on a large scale. With so many people in the Ministry of Works watching, he and Shang Junlin only needed to wait for the final results. Your Majesty, the weather is getting hotter and hotter. Even Shen Yu, who was afraid of the cold, put on a thin shirt. When the weather is really hot, Jin will take you to the summer palace to stay for a while. Shang Junlin brushed away the hair on Shen Yu's face. The capital of Dahuan had 4 distinct seasons. It was cold in winter and hot in summer. During the hottest period of every year, the emperor would take his concubines and officials to the summer palace to avoid the heat. After Shang Junlin ascended the throne, he had been on the battlefield for a long time. Later, he returned to the capital and did not have much interest in the summer palace. Therefore, until now, he had not been there even once. After receiving Shang Junlin's order, both sides got busy early. It was not a small project for the emperor to go to the summer palace to avoid the heat. They had to prepare a long time in advance. After some inquiries, eldest young master he finally heard news about his younger brother. The moment he heard the news, he was so angry that he trembled. If it were not for the servant who stopped him, he was afraid that he would have directly rushed to Master He and asked for his innocence. He always thought that his younger brother was just staying in a place that they did not know about. He never thought that that place would be a secret prison. A secret prison that did not see the light of day. Oh, how ridiculous. His father obviously knew this result long ago. Why didn't he tell them? He even said that his younger brother would come back directly after he finished what he was told to do. He probably did not intend to save his younger brother from the beginning. Young master, calm down. It's just a guess. It doesn't mean that young master is in that place. You can't panic. If something happens to you, who will care about young master? Eldest young master he reluctantly pulled back a bit of rationality. You're right. Continue to investigate. I want accurate information. If my younger brother is really in that place and father does not intend to do anything, then don't blame me for saving him myself. He did not want to care about the so-called overall situation. Those who gave the orders did not even show their faces. He did not know why his father was so obedient to them. The news has already been leaked. Shang Junlin turned around. It seems like the He family is planning to make a move as well. I just don't know how the He family will react and they find out that their son has already caused a huge disaster. The He family had been dormant for a long time. Since they were not willing to take the initiative to take action, Shang Junlin did not mind adding fuel to the fire. What about King Yu? Are those people really not going to care about his life or death? King Yu was almost confirmed to be the mastermind behind the fraud, but those people did not take any action. It should not be. It doesn't matter. If they don't show up, King Yu will continue to stay in the dark prison. They will be more anxious than us. They knew that there was a trap ahead. Should they jump in? No, it should be said that they had no choice but to jump in. Eldest young master he did not let them wait for long. He directly gave them a surprise. Your Majesty, do you mean that eldest young master he directly took the secret order of Master He and the other side to the dark prison? Shen Yu raised his eyebrows in surprise. That's right. How did he order those people to take action? Is the He family dormant in the capital waiting for these people to take action? It should be. Otherwise, what can those people from the He family do? It was not that Shang Junlin looked down on them. It was just that most of the people from the He family were servants and guards. In order to cover up, they did not bring many people. The He family and the forces behind them probably did not expect that all their plans would be ruined by eldest young Master He's desire to save his younger brother. Shang Junlin smiled but did not say anything. Eldest young Master He would never know that the information that he thought he had painstakingly gathered was actually leaked to him on purpose. But I also did not expect that he could really bring all those people out. While they were talking, the leader of the Imperial Guards reported, Your Majesty, all the people have been arrested. Shang Junlin held Shen Yu's hand. Do you want to go with me to take a look? Shen Yu shook his hand that was held by Shang Junlin. Your Majesty, it seems that you did not give me a chance to choose. Chapter 91. The two left the palace and went to the secret prison. A section of the road leading to the prison was paved with cement. When the carriage traveled on it, it was much smoother than other places. Shen Yu lifted the curtain and looked outside. When Dahuan is paved with such roads, it will be much more convenient to go back and forth. When there is a chance in the future, I will take you around Dahuan. Okay, Your Majesty, you can't go back on your words. The secret prison was brightly lit and was surrounded by layers of imperial guards. Shen Yu followed Shang Junlin out of the carriage inside. This is probably the most lively time in the secret prison. Wasn't it? In addition to the imperial guards, there were so many people who broke out of the prison. Shen Yu seriously doubted that the secret prison could hold all these people. On the other side, knowing that the secret order and the people were taken away by young Master He was furious. Are you all idiots? You let him take them away. Didn't I say that except for me, no one else can touch these things? Master, you really can't blame us. The servant wanted to cry but had no tears. Young Master He took your letter and said that you ordered him to come. You also told us before that you would do something tonight and asked us to be alert. We thought it was really you who sent young Master He. It could only be said that young Master He was too good at picking the time. After all, he was his eldest son. Master He wouldn't deliberately hide things from him. Except for some things that he really couldn't let him know, he would more or less reveal a bit of other things to young Master He. This time, it was the same. Family head He didn't have much vigilance against eldest young Master He, so he was easily tricked. Where is the letter? Show me. The servant took out a letter with trembling hands. Family head He took the letter and read it. He was so angry that he wanted to laugh. The handwriting and tone of the letter were almost the same as what he wrote. No wonder the servants didn't suspect anything. Besides, eldest young Master He made use of the time difference to take the girl away without anyone being suspicious. Master, what should we do now? That unfilial son most likely knows where his younger brother is and brought people to save him. See if you can bring him back. If you can, then there's still a chance of survival. If not. The servant didn't dare to delay and immediately left. However, before he could get far, he saw a group of Imperial Army soldiers surrounding him. In front of the well-trained Imperial Army, the He family had no power to resist. Patriarch He gritted his teeth and retreated to the secret passage with a few of his trusted subordinates. He had raised such a good son for nothing. In the end, Patriarch He and his eldest son, whom he missed dearly, met in the dark prison. By the time Shen Yu and Shang Junlin arrived, all of them had been caught. Shen Yu and Shang Junlin walked into the dark prison. The dark prison was filled with torches, so it was as bright as day. Shen Yu looked at the dark prison under such light for the first time. Patriarch He and eldest young Master He were locked up next to youngest young Master He. Prince Yu was locked up in another place. The rest of the prison breakers were either executed on the spot or locked up together. Prince Yu had heard the movements in the dark prison. He thought that these people were here to save him. However, he didn't expect that these people didn't stop at the place where he was locked up. They went directly to another place and were caught by the Imperial Army soldiers who had been lying in ambush for a long time. Prince Yu was stupefied from the beginning to the end. He had been in contact with the outside world these days. Those people also said that they would save him today. He waited and waited with full expectation. Finally, those people came. However, those people didn't even look at him. There were special officials in charge of the interrogation. Shang Junlin brought Shen Yu here just to see the situation. The leader of the Imperial Army followed beside the two of them and explained what happened that night. According to Your Majesty's order, I sent people to observe the eldest son of the He family in secret while guarding all the entrances of the secret prison. As expected, a group of unknown people met with the eldest son of the He family and headed straight for the secret prison. The rest of the matter was clear at a glance. Eldest young Master He, who was eager to save his younger brother, didn't know that he had fallen into the hunter's trap from the beginning. He brought people in and was caught red-handed. He directly accompanied youngest young master He. After sending away the leader of the imperial army, Shang Junlin took Shen Yu to the place where Prince Yu was locked up. You have expected this, right? You allowed me to send messages to the outside world. You have been waiting for this moment for a long time, haven't you? Prince Yu calmed down and thought of many details. When he was first locked up in the dark prison, he couldn't get in touch with the outside world. Why did he suddenly get in touch with the outside world one day? In addition, there were many things that were wrong. At that time, he was in a hurry to get out. Even if he noticed it, he didn't take it seriously. Now that he thought about it, there were too many flaws. Prince Yu is smart this time. Unfortunately, even if they want to save you, they don't dare to show up in person. They only dare to send some people from afar and hand you over to the unreliable He family. Shang Junlin sneered. Prince Yu was full of hatred. But now he was completely defeated. He could only watch as Shang Junlin stood in front of him with the posture of a winner. Shang Junlin was a high and mighty emperor who looked down on everything. But he was a prisoner who was crushed into the mud. His future was unknown. Shen Yu was also looking at Prince Yu. The difference between the current Prince Yu and the man in his previous life was too big. It was so big that he began to doubt whether they were really the same person. It turned out that without the so-called protagonist's halo and the praise that was deliberately applied to him, he was just such an ordinary person. Shang Junlin handed over the prison break to official Fang, who had hurried over, and returned to the palace with Shen Yu. Along the way, Shen Yu didn't speak. When they arrived at Yuzhang Palace, Shang Junlin directly carried him out of the carriage. Yu is still thinking about Prince Yu's matter. Shen Yu shook his head and nodded. He was thinking more about his previous life. He thought that what he saw with his own eyes in his previous life and the book he read after his death was the whole truth. At this moment, he suddenly realized that both of them were confusing. Sure enough, he couldn't rely too much on the so-called world's plot. Shang Junlin didn't put him down. He directly carried him and walked inside. Everywhere he passed, the palace servants lowered their heads. Shen Yu fluttered, "Your Majesty, quickly put me down." "I won't." Shang Junlin flatly refused. "So many people are watching, isn't it right and proper for me to carry my noble husband? Not only can I carry you, I can also kiss you, I can." Enough, Shen Yu didn't want him to continue, so he interrupted, "If your Majesty wants to carry me, then carry me. As long as your Majesty doesn't dislike me for being heavy." "How can I dislike a Yu for being heavy? A Yu should be fatter. It's more comfortable to carry." Shang Junlin weighed the young man in his arms. To him, Shen Yu's weight was really nothing. From a minor illness to a major one, Shen Yu's weight was still much lighter than a normal person's, even though he had recovered a little during this time. The He family was taken down in one fell swoop. Following the clues of the He family, they finally found traces of the mysterious power behind them. Although they couldn't find the real mastermind, it was much better than before. Shang Junlin arranged for the officials who were transferred back from other places one by one. The new officials who entered the imperial examination also gradually entered the imperial court. Everything seemed to be thriving. The Grand Commandant who planned the fraud in the imperial examination was removed from his position, and the position of Grand Commandant was vacant. The aristocratic families and the officials from poor families fought to the death in the imperial court for this position. Especially the aristocratic families, they had already lost too much. If the person who took the position of Grand Commandant wasn't from their faction, it would be a huge blow to them. As Shang Junlin promoted a group of new officials, the aristocratic family's monopoly of the imperial court was finally broken. Because of the aristocratic family's interference, the position of Grand Commandant was never decided. These disputes temporarily didn't affect the peace of Hanlon Academy. The two of you came together again. Jiang Huiqing smiled and greeted the person who spoke, replying, I rode on Brother Qingyu's carriage. You know, I'm a little embarrassed recently. The reason was that Jiang Huiqing took a fancy to a set of unique copies. He really wanted it and was worried that it would be bought by someone else if he was late, so he could only reluctantly buy it. I know. When you finish copying, don't forget to lend it to us. I won't forget. Jiang Huiqing was on duty with He Qingyu. At first, Jiang Huiqing had some misgivings and didn't want to get too close to him. Later, when he saw that his colleagues were easy to get along with, he acted much more casually. He still lived with He Qingyu, and the two of them went in and out together. The people in Hanlon Academy knew that they had a good relationship and often joked about it. Jiang Huiqing went from being embarrassed at the beginning to being able to face it calmly, and only 10 days had passed. That's right, I seem to have found one of the files you asked me to find last time. Do you want to take a look? Thank you. Jiang Huiqing's eyes lit up. It's been a few decades. Why are you looking for these? The person was curious. I admire the great scholars of the past and want to know more about them, Jiang Huiqing explained with a smile. That's right. You are indeed interested in these. I will help you pay more attention to other things. He didn't suspect anything. After all, Jiang Huiqing's hobby had been deeply rooted in the people of Hanlon Academy. It was normal for a person who could spend all his money to buy a unique book to be interested in the deeds of the great scholars of the past. Fortunately, he had a good relationship with Scholar He, so he could be helped from time to time. Xinyu occasionally received letters from Jiang Huiqing, and they were all about daily interesting things. Xinyu also wrote a few letters in reply. For some reason, Xinyu found that Shang Junlin didn't seem to like to talk about Prince Yu in front of him recently. Even if he asked, the topic would be changed after 2 or 3 sentences. Why does Your Majesty suddenly not want to talk to me about Prince Yu? After the topic was changed again, Xinyu asked. He wanted to know if Shang Junlin simply didn't want him to know about Prince Yu, or did he not want him to know about other things as well? Shang Junlin stroked Xinyu's neck and said in a hoarse voice, I brought you to the dark prison that day for selfish reasons. Ha! Xinyu was stunned. I know that when you were outside the palace, Prince Yu approached you. I wanted you to see Prince Yu, Your Majesty, Xinyu interrupted Shang Junlin. Does Your Majesty care about these things? Shang Junlin looked at him with deep eyes. The more you loved someone, the more you couldn't tolerate that person having any shadow of someone else. You could say that he was overbearing or paranoid, but he didn't want anyone else to occupy Xinyu's eyes and mind. He brought Xinyu to see Prince Yu because he wanted him to deeply understand that Prince Yu was not worthy of his love. After a long while, Shang Junlin held Xinyu's hand. I thought that I could ignore Yu's matters outside the palace, but I was wrong. I can't ignore it. Everything that happened to Yu, I can't ignore it. Was what Yu said to Prince Yu true? Did Yu really just treat Prince Yu as my substitute? Chapter 92. Xinyu was silent for a moment. Your Majesty, why are you so clear about what I said before I entered the palace? He asked while knowing the answer. With the hidden dragon guards, everything in the capital could not be hidden from Shang Junlin. Since he was chosen to enter the palace, it was normal for him to be investigated. I know that Prince Yu once approached you with his identity hidden. Later on, you two had a conflict. Shang Junlin pinched Xinyu's chin and turned his head to face him. Yu, answer my question. Shang Junlin's eyes were dark as he stared at Xinyu without blinking. A biting cold aura swept over. Xinyu narrowed his eyes uncomfortably. Your Majesty, don't you know what I think? Why do you care about Prince Yu? What is he? How can he be compared to your majesty? As for the matter between me and Prince Yu, your majesty must know my character very well. How can I be sincere to someone who approached me with an impure purpose from the beginning? Shen Yu knew that since Shang Junlin asked, he would not be able to mediate this matter. No matter what kind of feelings he had for Shang Junlin, he did not want Prince Yu to be a thorn between them. He and Prince Yu had broken off completely in his previous life. In this life, there would be no involvement. I know that Prince Yu is not a good person, Shang Junlin gently stroked Shen Yu's chin. You, I am not suspecting you. I know, Shen Yu covered Shang Junlin's mouth. Your Majesty, you don't need to say this. I should have explained to you about Prince Yu. I said those words just to annoy him. Now it seems that maybe it was a prophecy. The only difference is that I have no interest in finding a substitute. If I love someone, I will do whatever it takes to get them. Even if I can't get them, I will not do something as immoral as finding a substitute. What's more, how can Prince Yu be worthy? In Shen Yu's eyes, Shen Yu was arrogant and unscrupulous. Shang Junlin knew that what Shen Yu said was exactly what he thought. Shang Junlin loosened his grip on Shen Yu's chin and suddenly pulled her into his arms. Shen understands, you. Shen Yu patted Shang Junlin's back to comfort him. Your Majesty, you don't have to think too much. There is no fate between King Yu and me, and there will be no follow-up. Shang Junlin rested his head on Shen Yu's shoulder. Who is a Yu's fate? Of course it's your Majesty. With your Majesty here, no one else would have a chance. Does your Majesty lack confidence in yourself? After receiving Shen Yu's accurate answer, the haze in Shang Junlin's heart that had been covering him for many days was blown away by the wind. He tightened his arms and wished he could rub Shen Yu into his body. Seeing that Shang Junlin was comforted, Shen Yu was relieved. He didn't want King Yu to become a barrier between them. As summer came, the weather gradually became hotter. The courtiers received the news that they would go to the summer palace this year and began to prepare. While preparing, they couldn't help but be curious. Why does His Majesty suddenly want to go to the summer palace this year? A few years ago, some courtiers proposed it, but they were all rejected by him. His Majesty has never enjoyed himself. This time, it may be because of you. No matter what the reason is, the successive emperors of Dahuan have all gone to the summer palace every year, except for our current His Majesty. To be honest, the summer in the capital is too hot. It's good to go there to avoid the summer heat. The one who spoke was the official who had written several times to ask His Majesty to go to the summer palace to avoid the summer heat. He thought that he would have to spend the summer in the capital until he resigned. He didn't expect the surprise to come so suddenly. The weather was getting hotter and hotter. Shen Yu's clothes were getting thinner and thinner. His body temperature was still as cold as before. It was very comfortable to hold him in his arms. Shang Junlin held him in his arms whenever he had time. This made Shen Yu suffer. Men were hot-tempered. In the winter, it was fine. He was a human-shaped big heater. Shen Yu nestled in his arms and felt a steady stream of heat. It was very comfortable. It was different in the summer. Every time he was hugged by Shang Junlin for a while, he would sweat all over. There was a small lake in Yuzhang Palace. A pavilion was built on the lake. Since the weather became hot, Shen Yu's favorite place became this pavilion. According to Shen Yu's preferences, the pavilion was decorated in a new way. There was light-colored gauze hanging around, and there was ice in the corner. A cool breeze blew over the water, bringing a burst of coolness. Shang Junlin finished his work and returned to Yuzhang Palace. He looked around the room but couldn't find Shen Yu. He walked straight to the pavilion. There had always been no shortage of ice in the palace. However, Imperial Physician Goose said that Shin Yu's body wasn't good, so he couldn't be too cold. There wasn't much ice in the room. Although Shin Yu was afraid of the cold in the winter, he was the one who was the most cold in the summer. After the pavilion was cleaned up, Shin Yu came here most often. Shang Junlin lifted the gauze and saw Shin Yu half leaning on the couch, reading a book. Young eunuch Meng was holding a fan and gently fanning Shin Yu behind him. The palace servant knelt down to greet him. Shin Yu put down the book in his hand and sat up. "Your Majesty, are you done with your work?" "Yes." Shang Junlin walked to Shin Yu's side and sat down next to him. When he was setting up the pavilion, due to space restrictions, the soft couch inside was much smaller than the one in Jade Gate Palace. Shang Junlin could be considered to have fulfilled a small wish of his. As soon as Shang Junlin leaned over, he brought a burst of hot air. Shin Yu dodged to the side and was caught by the man. "Where are you hiding, you? It's so hot." Shin Yu refused to stick close to Shang Junlin. "There is ice in the pavilion. Let me hug you for a while." Shang Junlin firmly held Shin Yu's waist with one hand and did not let him go. "Your Majesty, don't you feel hot?" Shin Yu was helpless. Shang Junlin rubbed his cheek. "A Yu's body is very cold. But your Majesty's body is very hot." Shin Yu leaned his body away, wanting to stay away from the man. "A Yu likes to snuggle into my arms during winter. Why do you dislike me now?" Shang Junlin pressed Shin Yu's back and pulled him into his arms. Shin Yu gave up struggling and half lay in the man's arms. "Your Majesty also knows that it's winter. There was ice in the pavilion, so it was not that hot." Shin Yu quietly lay there for a while, and the temperature of his body gradually dropped. He knew that the man would not let him go, so he simply found a comfortable position and continued to read the book on the side. "How is the use of ice in your room recently?" Shang Junlin asked Mu Shi, who was serving beside him. Mu Shi told him the amount, which was strictly according to Shang Junlin's instructions. Shang Junlin nodded with satisfaction. Shin Yu was speechless. He knocked his head against the man's chest. "Your Majesty has already given an order to the people in my palace. Are you still worried that I will use more ice?" "You, did you forget that you almost caught a cold last time because you were greedy for the cold?" Shang Junlin pinched his earlobe. Shin Yu lowered his head guiltily. The weather suddenly became hot a few days ago, and he could not stand it, so he asked the palace people to put more ice in the bedroom. If Shang Junlin had not found out and removed some ice in time, he would have most likely fallen ill because of the cold. After that, Shang Junlin strictly controlled the amount of ice in his palace. Shin Yu read the book for a while and suddenly thought of something. "Your Majesty, is it only the influential families in the capital that can use ice? Some big merchants can also use it." "Why?" "Most of the ice used in Dahuan in the summer was stored ice. Not to mention the huge amount of work, there were not many that could be preserved. Some families with the ability would store their own ice. Those who did not have this ability would choose to buy it. However, because of the quantity, the price was often higher, and ordinary people rarely bought it. I just suddenly thought of a way to make ice, and it's very simple. If we can make ice, the people in Dahuan can also use it." Shin Yu said the method he learned from the book. As one of the golden fingers of the main character in the book, Shin Qingran, it brought him some benefits. "What method?" Shang Junlin was interested. "When saltpeter is dissolved in water, it can be made into ice." Shin Yu ordered people to bring saltpeter and water. After experimenting, he really got ice. Looking at the freshly made ice that was emitting cold air, Shin Yu's eyes flashed with a touch of complexity. In his previous life, when the King of Yu found out about this method, the first thing he did was to kill everyone who knew about it. Then he arranged for a group of mute slaves to make ice for him and sell it at a high price. In his previous life, Shinyu did not know that the method to make ice was so simple. When he knew that the king of Yu used mute slaves to make ice, he thought that there was some secret behind it. This method is really convenient. Shang Junlin felt that the newly made ice was not much different from storing ice. Compared to storing ice in winter, it was much easier to make saltpeter. With this method, ordinary people can also use ice in summer. Mu Shi was so shocked by this scene that she could not close her mouth. After giving the things to Shang Junlin, Shinyu did not ask any more questions. What Shang Junlin wanted to do with it was his business, as long as he did not end up as a money-making tool like the king of Yu. He knew that Shang Junlin would not do that, otherwise, he would not have taken out these things. Shinyu wiped his hands and lay back on the couch. With the addition of a basin of ice in the pavilion, it was even cooler. The palace servants kept looking at the newly made ice. Their eyes were filled with curiosity. Shang Junlin also stood beside the ice and looked at it for a while before sitting back on the couch. Once the news of the new method to make ice was announced, it caused an uproar in the imperial court. Everyone knew how hot the summer in the capital was. Those who had the ability to store ice would definitely store more in winter. Those who did not have this ability could only buy ice in summer at a high price. If they could make ice in summer, it would bring more convenience. I have not announced the method to the public for the time being. Shang Junlin changed out of his court attire and walked towards Shinyu. I will let the imperial court control it for a period of time. When the conditions are right in the future, I will decide whether to announce it or not. The imperial court would set the price. This could prevent the ice from falling into the hands of a small number of aristocratic families and becoming their money-making tool. It could also prevent some unscrupulous merchants from selling the ice at a high price to other places in Dahuan. Your Majesty can decide. Shinyu did not have any objections. After the date of the trip to the Summer Palace was confirmed, everyone in Yuzhang Palace became busy. A large group of people headed to the Summer Palace. Shinyu was directly arranged to stay in Shang Junlin's residence. The Summer Palace was built halfway up the mountain. As soon as they came up, they could feel a burst of coolness. Shinyu squinted his eyes in satisfaction. Your Majesty did not arrange a place for me to stay. Shinyu looked around at the decorations. There were many things that could only be used by the Emperor. You naturally has to live with me. Shang Junlin did not give him a chance to refuse. He directly picked him up and walked inside. The palace servants lowered their heads and focused on their own matters. Shinyu was already used to Shang Junlin carrying him here and there. He skillfully wrapped his arms around the man's neck and gently blew into his ear. I have been living with your Majesty. The ministers won't say anything, right? Shang Junlin's footsteps paused. His eyes darkened. He quickly put him on the bed and ran his fingers across his cheek. You has to behave well. Chapter 93. Shinyu was a noble, so naturally, he should have his own residence in the palace. The quality of his residence would show how favored he was. At the beginning of the arrangement, the people in the palace had allocated a good courtyard for Shinyu, but Shang Junlin rejected it and arranged for Shinyu to live in his residence. When they were in the palace, it was Shang Junlin's biggest regret that he couldn't move Shinyu to his own palace. Now that he had the chance, he wouldn't let Shinyu live in another courtyard. Shinyu said those words to tease Shang Junlin. He didn't care what those officials thought of him. If he really cared about these things, he wouldn't have chosen to enter the palace in the first place. Shinyu was gently placed on the bed by the man. Then, he hooked his arm around Shang Junlin's neck and didn't let him get up. Your Majesty, what do you want me to do? Shang Junlin rubbed Shen Yu's soft lips with his fingertips. With a little force, his fingers sank into her lips. What does you think? Isn't spring already over? Shen Yu looked at Shang Junlin with clear eyes. Shang Junlin reacted for a while before he realized what Shen Yu was hinting at. He leaned over and covered the young man with his body. With you by my side, why do I need to wait until spring? Shen Yu's tongue touched the man's fingertips. It was like a casual sweep, which easily aroused the desire in the man's heart. But your majesty is going to see the ministers soon. Shen Yu blinked innocently, as if she wasn't the one who had deliberately aroused the man's desire. Shang Junlin suddenly withdrew his hand, pressed the young man to himself, and kissed him fiercely. The man's kiss could never be called gentle. It was like a storm with a strong sense of aggression. Every movement showed the intention of eating the young man. Shen Yu was forced to raise her head and bear all the wind and rain that swept over her. Are you sure that I can't do anything now? Shang Junlin bit Shen Yu's lips and slowly retreated. Shen Yu's face was dyed with a layer of light pink. Her lips seemed to be painted with rouge. Her hair was spread out under her body, slightly messy. Your Majesty obviously started it first. The young man's eyes were watery and red. He lay down softly. Shang Junlin almost exhausted his lifetime of restraint, but he didn't do anything. I'll let you go this time. After he finished speaking, Shang Junlin got up. Shen Yu tilted his head and laughed softly. He didn't know when it started, but he liked to see Shang Junlin's helpless expression. Your Majesty, Shen Yu's eyes glanced at a certain place. No. After settling down here, he still needed to meet with the courtiers. This little time was not enough. Shen Yu laughed enough and slowly sat up. In fact, he was also a little moved, but it was not as obvious as Shang Junlin. He was fine after a while. I also asked Imperial Physician Gu to come over. If you are not used to it, let him take a look at you. Shang Junlin tidied Shen Yu's hair. Because he had helped Shen Yu recuperate, Imperial Physician Gu had become the person Shang Junlin valued the most in the Imperial Hospital. This time, Shang Junlin had also brought him along. Officials were allowed to bring their family members to the Summer Palace. Imperial Physician Gu was worried about leaving Gu Huai alone in the capital, so he brought him along. The other courtiers also brought their wives and favored children. The Summer Palace, which had been cold for many years, suddenly became lively. After Shen Yu tidied up, he brought Mu Shi out of the courtyard. This palace was built with the power of several generations of the Great Huan dynasty's monarchs. As the monarch, the place where Shang Junlin lived was the best one. Young master, this place is so beautiful. The surrounding scenery was unique. Mu Shi couldn't take it all in. Yes, in terms of enjoyment, who can compare to the imperial family? This was the first time Shen Yu came to this summer palace. When the late emperor was still on the throne, Duke Shenbei doted on the concubine's son. Even if he could bring his family members here, he would never think of Shen Yu, the legitimate son. On the contrary, Shen Qingran and Madame Ru came here because of Duke Shenbei. After Shen Qingran went back, he showed off in front of little Shen Yu. Shen Yu thought at that time that he must come here with his own strength in the future to see what it was like. Now, not only did he come here, but he also lived in the most honorable place. However, he no longer had the same mood as when he was a child. Who did Duke Shenbei bring here? Shen Yu asked. It's concubine Zhou, who used to be at odds with concubine Ru. Mu Shi had already found out. Shen Qingran didn't come. No, he's still locked up by Duke Shenbei. Duke Shenbei had been fighting with the forces of the King of Yu for a while. The trouble caused by Shen Qingran was also solved after a lot of effort. Now, whenever he heard Shen Qingran's name, he would feel annoyed. How could he bring him out? Shang Junlin brought nearly half of the officials here. Although he said it was to avoid the summer heat, in fact, it was just a change of location to deal with government affairs. There were still a lot of memorials to approve every day. Because he was not in the capital, the workload was heavier than before. Shen Yu saw that Shang Junlin was so busy every day that his feet didn't touch the ground. He sincerely felt that being the emperor was not a good job. Even if he was in the summer palace, Shang Junlin didn't relax his control of all kinds of things in the capital. Every day, the movements in the capital would be transmitted to the summer palace through a special channel. The summer palace was smaller than the capital. Shen Yu bumped into Duke Shenbei several times. At that time, whether or not it succeeds depends on Mississippi. At the corner, Shen Yu elbowed Shang Junlin. His Majesty is really popular. If I didn't follow him out today, would he have a beautiful encounter with the woman in front of him? Is you jealous? Shang Junlin grabbed Shen Yu's arm and directly pulled him into his arms. He leaned close to his ear and whispered, "From the beginning to the end, Shen only wants you." Shen thought you already knew. The conversation at the corner was still going on, but Shen Yu couldn't hear it. The wet touch spread from the back of his ear, little by little, until it reached his lips and stopped. Shang Junlin's lips were close to Shen Yu's skin. His hot breath sprayed on Shen Yu's face. I thought they had already given up. Shen Yu frowned. Shang Junlin had repeatedly expressed his attitude, but he didn't expect these people to still be unwilling. Shang Junlin's fingertips gently brushed the wrinkles between Shen Yu's eyebrows. How can they give up so easily? With the imperial power hanging in front of them, no matter how Shen expresses his attitude, they will still have this kind of heart. Do you think they are interested in Jin? No, they are interested in the power and interests behind Jin. Does His Majesty want to go out and see her? How could Shen Yu not know this? Since ancient times, how many women who entered the harem were completely willing? Zhen Ziyu is jealous. Why would Jin still want to see her? Shang Junlin suddenly picked up Shen Yu, turned around and left. The leaves rustled down. Not far away, two women turned their heads and only saw the swaying branches. Did someone come by just now? I don't think so. This servant didn't notice anyone. Shen Yu was carried all the way back to the bedroom. Eunuch Meng came forward and was directly reprimanded. Eunuch Meng didn't dare to stay and led all the palace servants out of the room. Shen Yu was thrown onto the bed and pressed down by Shang Junlin. Shang Junlin was half a head taller than Shen Yu and could completely wrap him under his body. Shen Yu was uncomfortable being pressed down by Shang Junlin, so he pushed Shang Junlin. Shang Junlin didn't move away. Instead, he moved closer and stared at the young man under him with his long and narrow eyes. Shen Yu narrowed his eyes and skillfully turned over to press down on Shang Junlin. Shang Junlin didn't expect Shen Yu's actions and his eyes flashed with a trace of astonishment. Shen Yu sat on Shang Junlin's waist with one hand on his chest and the other holding his chin. His Majesty attracts bees and butterflies. I want to punish His Majesty. Shang Junlin's tense body relaxed and his eyes flashed with interest. How does you want to punish Shin? Just punish His Majesty by not being able to move. Shen Yu finished speaking and bent down. Her black hair poured down and spread over Shang Junlin's entire chest. Shang Junlin's Adam's apple bobbed violently. This was the sweetest and most torturous thing. Let Jin touch you. Shang Junlin couldn't hold back anymore. He turned over and held Shen Yu down, then lowered his head and kissed him. The kiss went all the way down, accompanied by a light nibbling, and finally stopped at a certain spot. Shen Yu moved uneasily and suddenly felt that he was wrapped in warmth. Don't. Shen Yu got up from the swing. Take me to see her. Before he got close, Shinyu heard a woman's gentle voice. This voice gave Shinyu a familiar feeling. When he got closer, he saw that it was the person he met a few days ago. After he came back that day, Shinyu went for wool and came home shorn. He almost got himself killed. Now that he saw her, he suddenly felt a dull pain somewhere. That day, except for not going in, he did everything he should and shouldn't. In the end, Shinyu was so tired that he couldn't even lift a finger. What's going on? Shinyu coughed softly and interrupted the confrontation. Guijun. The guard bowed. This woman said that His Majesty left something with her. She wants to return it to His Majesty in person. But she didn't summon anyone, so I can't let her in. How could His Majesty leave something with you? Shinyu looked at the woman standing outside indifferently. The woman bit her lip. His Majesty went to Yin Pavilion that day. This humble woman met His Majesty there. The thing was also left there. Give it to me. I will give it to His Majesty for you. Shinyu didn't intend to let her in. This woman coveted the imperial harem. Her purpose for coming here today was probably not pure. No, I have to give it to His Majesty personally. The woman took a step back, her eyes red. Shinyu narrowed his eyes. Is your purpose to return the thing or to see His Majesty? If it's the former, just give it to me. If it's the latter, I advise you not to waste your time. Her purpose was naturally the latter. That day, she waited in the woods until late at night, but she didn't see His Majesty. When she went back, she was puzzled. The next day, she heard that His Majesty was furious and forbade them to have any evil thoughts. She was silent for 2 days. In order to relieve her depression, she got lost. She didn't expect to pick up the jade pendant that His Majesty dropped. At that moment, she realized that her opportunity had come. She also heard that Shin Guijun was a very scheming person in the palace. Her brother warned her not to confront this person. She didn't achieve her purpose, so she didn't want to make enemies easily. But she didn't expect that Shin Guijun would be so direct. Being looked at by those clear eyes, it seemed that all the calculations in her heart couldn't be hidden. How can Guijun slander this humble woman like this? This humble woman just wants to return the jade pendant that His Majesty left in this humble woman's hands. There is no other intention. No matter what, she must never admit her thoughts. Jade pendant. His Majesty left the jade pendant with you. The young man's expression was unreadable. The woman felt a little uneasy in her heart, but she still nodded. I was wondering why His Majesty lost a jade pendant 2 days ago. It turns out that you picked it up. Shang Junlin didn't care if it was lost. It was only when Shinyu found that the jade pendant he wore was missing a piece that he realized that it was lost. Since it was lost, there is no need to take it back. But after all, it is His Majesty's personal item. It's not good to leave it in the hands of outsiders. Mu Shi, give me the jade pendant. Mu Shi walked to the woman's side. Regardless of her struggle, she took the jade pendant back and handed it to Shinyu. Shinyu didn't even look at it and directly threw it on the ground. In an instant, the jade pendant was smashed into pieces. It's something that has been touched by others. Just destroy it. Chapter 95. This was worn by His Majesty. Aren't you afraid that His Majesty will blame you for destroying it? The woman didn't expect that Shinyu would be so unreasonable. Her face changed greatly. If I fell, then so be it. His Majesty will only care about whether I fell to my heart's content. Shinyu turned around and said coldly, send this girl back. How could the woman be willing to accept that her plan had failed before it could be implemented? She looked at the jade pendant that was broken by Shinyu, and her eyes flashed with resentment. What was worse than the thing that she wanted was easily taken away by others. She had waited for a long time for this opportunity, but it was easily destroyed by others. Moreover, it was in such a way. How could she not see that Xinyu was warning her not to touch something that she shouldn't covet? But why? Xinyu was just luckier than her. He entered the palace one step ahead of her. Why did he put on such a high and mighty attitude? Guijun, does His Majesty know that you are so jealous? I just wanted to return His Majesty's jade pendant, but you directly broke it. Xinyu stopped and looked at the woman coldly. I thought everyone knew that I am a person who can't tolerate sand in my eyes. Don't let me know that you have ideas that you shouldn't have in the future, otherwise. The pressure in the young man's eyes was like a mountain. The woman had no doubt that if she really dared to do anything, her end would be the same as the jade pendant. She was too careless. She almost forgot that there was a woman who deliberately fell on His Majesty and was still detained in Yuzhang Palace. She began to feel fear in her heart. No matter how ambitious she was just an unmarried woman. In terms of knowledge, how could she compare with Xinyu? What's the noise? A man's low voice sounded from behind. Xinyu tilted his head and saw Shang Junlin coming from another direction. He was originally discussing things with the Prime Minister and several ministers. Suddenly, he received the news that a woman wanted to see him. She also said that she wanted to return his personal belongings. Shang Junlin directly sent the messenger away and didn't plan to come out to meet her. If he didn't hear that Xinyu went out, he would never come out. Greetings, Your Majesty. Everyone present bowed. Shang Junlin excused their salutations. He didn't even look at the delicate woman who was about to cry and walked straight to Xinyu. Is you feeling better today? Ever since that night, Xinyu had always been listless. Shang Junlin was extremely anxious. He only felt relieved after Imperial Physician Gu confirmed that Xinyu was fine. For the next few days, he did not dare to cause trouble. It was rare for Xinyu to have a good rest for a few days. His spirit had also slowly recovered. On the way here, Shang Junlin already had a rough idea of what had happened. She was just a stranger to him, so he was too lazy to waste his time on her. Xinyu snuggled into Shang Junlin's arms. Your Majesty, I broke your jade pendant, you won't blame me, right? You doesn't like it. It's just a jade pendant. Shang Junlin held Xinyu's hand and put it in front of his eyes. Is you injured? Xinyu was a little unhappy at first, but she was amused by Shang Junlin's action. It's just a jade pendant. How can I be injured? Next time, if you don't like it, you can let the people around you break it. You don't have to do it yourself. Shang Junlin pinched Xinyu's fingers. That woman. Xinyu looked sideways at the woman outside. The woman finally met Shang Junlin. She originally wanted to do something. It would be better if she could plant the seed of Xinyu in Shang Junlin's heart. However, she didn't expect that Shang Junlin didn't care about the others at all. He didn't even look at her. The woman's face was pale and she was on the verge of collapse. However, no one pitied her because of her weakness. How many people from the palace were innocent? They could see the woman's true intentions at a glance. Now that she didn't achieve her goal and the emperor didn't punish her, why did she pretend to be bullied? Someone, send her back. She will be punished by copying the precepts for women. Order the elders in her family to take good care of her. I don't want the same thing to happen again. Yes. Also, Shang Junlin slowly rubbed Xinyu's fingers. Next time, don't let these people cause trouble in front of the emperor. If they disturb the emperor's mood, I will hold you responsible. Yes. Your Majesty allowed these people to bring their family members here. It's a grace to them. Who would have thought that these people would have so many thoughts behind the scenes? Shen Yu certainly knew that the woman wasn't the only one with such thoughts. Whether it was for power or for other reasons, there would always be moths to a flame. Shang Junlin was swift and decisive. He didn't leave any face for the woman. Not long after, everyone in the palace knew that the daughter of the assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue had failed in her attempt to get close to the emperor and had been disliked. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue flew into a rage. Lock up this disgraceful thing. Without my permission, no one is allowed to let her out. He knew that his daughter had some thoughts. To be honest, he was also a bit moved. Looking at Shen Guijuan's current treatment, he knew that if his daughter entered the palace and was favored, what kind of glory would it be? Because of this, he didn't stop his daughter's actions. However, he didn't think that Shang Junlin would be so merciless. Now, who didn't know what his daughter had done? She received mocking looks from others. Because the assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue was born in an aristocratic family, his path had been paved by his elders. He was just waiting to be promoted to the Minister of Revenue. When had he ever encountered such a situation? Your Majesty is putting the face of the Tan family on the ground and stepping on it. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue fiercely downed a cup of wine. That's not all. Your Majesty has his own ideas. Do you really think that he's only targeting the Tan family? He clearly wants to use this matter to make an example out of us and warn us not to have thoughts that we shouldn't have. Your Majesty's prejudice against the aristocratic families isn't new. Originally, we planned to send more sensible aristocratic daughters into the palace to ease the tension between the two sides. Who would have thought that Your Majesty would be blinded by a man and not want anyone else? Our plan can only be put on hold. Allowing those rumors to spread was also a form of probing. In the past, the emperor lived in the depths of the palace and had almost no contact with the aristocratic daughters. In the palace, as long as the emperor wanted, he could see the aristocratic daughters at any time. Perhaps the emperor would change his mind after seeing how good the aristocratic daughters were. The emperor didn't care about those private rumors. Just when they thought they saw an opportunity, the emperor's fierce attack directly shattered their fantasies. The emperor didn't tacitly agree. He clearly wanted to find an opportunity to deal with it once and for all. After this, who would dare to have such thoughts? No matter what they thought, at least they wouldn't dare to show it. Every family would restrain their family and their subordinates. The aristocratic families couldn't afford to lose face. After Shang Junlin's outburst, Shen Yu didn't encounter similar things again. Mu Shi also said that no one dared to talk about these things in private. Shen Yu was quite satisfied with this result. No one would be happy if their own people were constantly being targeted by others. Even during the hottest time of the year, the temperature in the palace wasn't too high. It was even a little cold at night. Finally, Shang Junlin wouldn't be despised when he hugged Shen Yu to sleep. A batch of memorials was sent from the capital every 3 days. Today was the day to send memorials again. Shen Yu watched eunuch Meng instruct a group of eunuchs to move the memorials into the study room. Then, he moved the memorials out and sent them back to the imperial city. Why are there so many memorials this time? Shen Yu walked in and took a look. He was surprised. Those aristocratic families who stayed in the capital received news about the palace. Most of them are probably related to that incident. After Shang Junlin finished reading the memorials in his hand, he put down his pen and instructed, Meng Chang, sort these memorials and put the less important ones aside. Eunuch Meng deftly went to sort the memorials. Shang Junlin led Shen Yu out of the study room. The people in the capital have already used ice. The Ministry of Works asked me for the recipe to make ice, but I haven't given it to them yet. Now, the people who were arranged to make ice were all people from the imperial farmsteads. These farmsteads belonged to Shang Junlin. Shang Junlin had specially instructed them not to leak the recipe to make ice. Your Majesty, don't give it to them yet. Shen Yu suddenly thought of another use of saltpeter, to make weapons with great lethality. After the new department is established, I want to put the recipe there. Shang Junlin was talking about the Bureau of Natural Resources that was being prepared by the Imperial Court. It was independent of all the departments in the Imperial Court and directly under the Emperor. At the beginning, it was agreed that the officials in the Bureau of Natural Resources would not have the same power as the 6 ministries. After this plan was put forward, not many people opposed it, except for the Minister of Revenue. After the Bureau of Natural Resources was established, a lot of money was bound to be invested. The Minister of Revenue valued the money in the national treasury more than anyone else. He only wanted to spend every penny on the blade. I want the Bureau of Natural Resources to be completely separated from the Imperial Court. If the profits from the things made can be used as the cost of the next research, then we won't be restrained by any forces in the Imperial Court. I want a pure Bureau of Natural Resources that won't have too many entanglements with other officials. Shang Junlin explained his plan. Shen Yu felt that this was quite good. Did the Minister of Revenue impeach me again? Ever since that incident, the Minister of Revenue didn't like Shen Yu. He could find a reason to impeach Shen Yu no matter what he did. He also did a lot of things that deliberately distorted the facts. You, don't worry. I will avenge you. Shang Junlin had also been eyeing the position of the Minister of Revenue for a long time. The two strolled to the lake. The lotus flowers in the lake were growing well. An exquisite boat was parked on the shore. Shen Yu pulled Shang Junlin over. Your Majesty, do you know how to row a boat? A little. Then he knew how to row a boat. Your Majesty, how about we row a boat? Seeing the interest in Shen Yu's eyes, Shang Junlin didn't refuse. Eunuch Meng wanted to call a few imperial bodyguards who knew how to row a boat over, but Shang Junlin refused. He got off the boat first, then took Shen Yu. The boat wasn't big, just enough to accommodate 2 people. Shang Junlin rowed the boat to the center of the lake and stopped. Shen Yu reached out to the lotus heads not far away. He successfully plucked one, broke it open, and put one into his mouth. It was so sweet. Shang Junlin saw that Shen Yu liked it, so he rowed the boat closer. He plucked some and put it beside Shen Yu. Yu likes it. When we go back, I'll ask the kitchen to make some lotus seed snacks for you. Do you have them in the palace? Of course. There are many different kinds of lotus flowers in the palace. The weather in the temporary imperial residence was cool. Even if the sun shone down, it wouldn't be too hot. Shang Junlin was afraid that Shen Yu would get sunburnt, so he broke off a lotus leaf and held it above Shen Yu's head. Shen Yu ate the lotus head. It was sweet in his mouth. He peeled one and put it beside Shang Junlin's mouth. Your Majesty, have some too. Shen Yu's hands were very white. Under the sunlight, his fingers became more lustrous. It was hard to tell whether the lotus seed or his fingers were more attractive. Shang Junlin's Adam's apple bobbed up and down. Chapter 96. Shang Junlin lowered his head and sucked on the lotus seed along with Shen Yu's finger. After biting it gently, he released it. It's very sweet. Shen Yu didn't know if he was referring to the lotus seed or something else. Shen Yu withdrew his hand as if he was scalded. Under the man's increasingly aggressive gaze, his face gradually turned red. You, try it. After speaking, Shang Junlin leaned over, pulled the young man under his body, and kissed him. Shen Yu had just eaten the lotus seed. The sweetness of the lotus seed was like sweet dew in his mouth, tempting him to suck on it. The sweetness of the lotus seed lingered between their lips and teeth. Shang Junlin pressed Shen Yu down and deepened the kiss. The lotus leaves had unknowingly leaned to one side and covered their faces. After the kiss, Shang Junlin slightly distanced himself from Shinyu. One of his hands was still on Shinyu's back, supporting him from falling down. Shinyu was panting slightly, and there was a touch of rouge at the corners of his eyes. Shang Junlin's eyes became darker and darker. Shinyu felt Shang Junlin's interest and turned his head. Your Majesty, Eunuch Meng and the others are still on the shore. If you lower your voice, they won't find out. Shang Junlin raised his hand and brushed away Shinyu's messy hair. His fingers lingered. No. Shinyu refused without thinking. Your Majesty, how many days do you want me to lie down this time? This time, I won't do it like last time, okay? Shang Junlin knew that he had indeed gone too far that day. Except for not really going in, Shinyu had been bullied by him from top to bottom. Shinyu looked around. The place where they were was surrounded by lotus leaves, far from the shore. No one on the shore could see what they were doing. Didn't the imperial physician say that Your Majesty should control yourself? Recalling that night, Shinyu didn't want to agree. He was not averse to this kind of thing, but if it was like last time, then forget it. His body could not withstand Shang Junlin's torment. How long has it been since I last messed with you? Shang Junlin lowered his head and rubbed against the young man like a big clingy dog. Shinyu was annoyed by him. The two of them were so close together that any of their reactions would be easily detected by the other party. Shang Junlin sensed something and leaned on Shinyu's shoulder, laughing softly. Ayu wants it too, doesn't she? I don't want to. Shinyu glared at him. If he hadn't rubbed against him, would he have become like this? Okay, Ayu, I promise, just once, okay? Shang Junlin did not give up, his warm breath sprayed on Shinyu's neck. Shinyu had no choice but to relent. Only once, with your hands. Like a dog that had eaten meat, Shang Junlin's eyes suddenly lit up. The unrowed boat swayed gently, ripples of water rippling under the boat. Shinyu bit her lips to prevent the sound from overflowing. The man's lips lingered on her neck, all the way up, swallowing all the sound into his stomach. The sun gradually set in the west. The palace servants waiting by the shore looked anxiously at the center of the lake from time to time. Mushi looked anxiously for a while and asked, Eunuch Meng, do we need to find Her Majesty in Guijun? It had been so long, why was there no movement at all? Eunuch Meng could not make up his mind. Without Her Majesty's orders, they could not act rashly. Wait a little longer. If Her Majesty and Guijun do not come out before dark, we will send people to find them. Shinyu's body moved up and down with the rocking of the boat. She struggled to avoid the man's kiss. Her Majesty said that she would only, I didn't lie. Ayu, be good, come closer. Shang Junlin nibbled the delicate skin on Shinyu's neck and coaxed in a hoarse voice. He didn't lie, but it took a little longer. Shinyu was so angry that she bit Shang Junlin. The man paused for a moment, then became even more ruthless. Just as Eunuch Meng was hesitating whether to send the guards to find them, a small boat slowly appeared in front of them. Eunuch Meng took the lead to welcome it. Shang Junlin carried the young man wrapped in a black robe and got off the boat. Eunuch Meng quickly ordered people to stop the boat and walked behind Shang Junlin. Your Majesty, go back first. The man's voice was full of satisfaction. Eunuch Meng tactfully stopped talking and followed behind Shang Junlin with his head lowered. Inadvertently, he saw an arm hanging down from the black robe. The white skin was covered with red marks. Eunuch Meng hurriedly looked away and did not dare to look anymore. Shinyu was not asleep. His leg only hurt. What surprised him more was that Shang Junlin actually carried those small bottles with him. Why did Your Majesty bring these? Shen Yu half leaned on the bed and played with the jade bottle in his hand. He took it out from Shang Junlin's robe. One bottle was fine, but Shang Junlin actually brought several bottles. The jade bottle was thin and long. As it was played with by the fair and slender fingers, it seemed to have some kind of arousal. Shang Junlin thought of the pair of hands that held him just now. The skin on the palms was tender and slightly cold to the touch. He was addicted to the taste. Your Majesty. Seeing that he was distracted, Shen Yu stopped what he was doing. Shang Junlin coughed softly. I just thought that it would be more convenient to carry it with me. What was convenient? Shen Yu did not want to think about it. Shang Junlin suddenly reached out and held Shen Yu's hand. Together with the bottle in his hand, he wrapped it in his palm. Do you feel uncomfortable now? I'm fine. Except for a few places. This time, it was indeed fine. When he woke up the next day, Shen Yu was in good spirits. Except for some places that were still a little uncomfortable, compared to the last time, there were no sequelae. Young Master, Her Majesty sent people to deliver a lot of lotus seeds. Mu Shi led people to move the lotus seeds into the room. There were indeed a lot. Shen Yu counted silently. It was enough for him to eat for a few days. Shang Junlin was still worried about Shen Yu, so he called Imperial Physician Gu over the next day. Your Majesty's body is fine. Imperial Physician Gu said after taking his pulse. Shen Yu also felt that he was fine. I told you that there was no need to trouble Imperial Physician Gu to make a trip. Let Imperial Physician Gu take a look. I'm more at ease. After that, Imperial Physician Gu was invited to the study to ask about Shen Yu's physical condition in detail. In the middle of the night, Shen Yu was awakened by the noise. Shang Junlin patted his back. I'll go take a look. You can continue sleeping. After that, Shang Junlin put on his coat and went out. Shen Yu lay down for a while but couldn't fall asleep. He simply sat up and asked Mu Shi to light the lamp. What's the situation outside? It seems that a minister's residence caught fire. Mu Shi had been waiting outside the room. She heard the news from a palace servant. How could it catch fire? The emperor and important ministers of the imperial court lived in the palace. Which one of them wasn't a noble? The servants were always very careful. It was almost impossible for such a big accident to happen. Shen Yu put on a cloak and walked outside. At a glance, he saw the blazing fire. This direction seems to be the residence of a certain aristocratic family. Shen Yu muttered. It's the residence of the assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue. Why did you come out? Shang Junlin walked in from outside and directly pulled Shen Yu into his arms. At night, the temperature in the palace was low. Shen Yu nestled in the man's arms for a while and gradually felt warm. I couldn't sleep, so I came out to take a look. I've already arranged for someone to put out the fire. Don't worry. Shang Junlin touched Shen Yu's hair. The fire in the palace was not a trivial matter. Whether it was man-made or accidental, it needed to be thoroughly investigated. Shang Junlin sent Shen Yu back to his room to continue resting. He went to meet the ministers. The Prime Minister and others had been waiting in the study for a while. After Shang Junlin came in, he sat in his seat and knocked on the table. What do you think of tonight's incident? The answer given by Lord Tan is that the servants accidentally knocked down the candle flame and the house burned. Fortunately, it was discovered early and didn't cause too much damage. Who was injured? Except for Miss Tan's face, everyone else is fine. Do you think it was an accident? In my opinion, it doesn't seem like it. Why was Miss Tan the one who was injured, and after such an incident? Because Shang Junlin wanted to punish the chicken to warn the monkey, he didn't hide what happened that day from the public. Now, only a few days after the incident, Miss Tan almost died in the fire. No one would think that it was a coincidence. In the small courtyard of the Tan family, Miss Tan had just been rescued from the fire. She was still in shock and leaned in the arms of a servant girl. She knew better than anyone that tonight's fire was not an accident. If she hadn't been on guard, she wouldn't have been able to walk out alive. She touched the untreated wound on her face, and her eyes were obscure. "You're so embarrassing. You even embarrassed yourself in front of His Majesty. If you don't have the life, don't have such ambition. In the end, you'll only implicate us." The Tan family's legitimate daughter looked at Miss Tan condescendingly. Her tone was full of sarcasm. "You're really lucky to be able to escape from such a fire." Miss Tan silently clenched her fists. "Father, in my opinion, we should just send away those careless servants. No one was injured anyway." The Tan family's legitimate daughter had always disliked her younger sister, who was born of a concubine. It wasn't because of the difference between legitimate and concubine, but because her good sister was like her yin-yang. They liked to pretend to be weak. Every time she did something wrong or wanted something, as long as she put on a bullied face, she would get what she wanted. This time, she was even more daring. She went directly to His Majesty and didn't even look at herself. She dared to covet that position. The result was that the Tan family became the laughingstock of everyone. "All right," the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Revenue scolded. "Call a doctor for your sister to look at her face." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Revenue didn't want to look at this disgraceful daughter and left with a flick of his sleeve. When he thought of explaining these things to His Majesty, he had a headache. But he couldn't not go. When Shang Junlin returned, the sky was already bright. "Shin, you didn't sleep well in the latter half of the night and got up early." The servant made lotus seed porridge and presented it to her. The snow-white lotus seeds floated in the bowl. Shin Yu used a spoon to poke at them. "Why are you up so early?" Shang Junlin walked in. "Mushi, go and bring a bowl of porridge for His Majesty." After Shin Yu gave the order, she answered Shang Junlin's question, "I couldn't sleep." "How is the matter being handled?" "For the time being, we only found out that it was an accident." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Revenue also insisted that it was a servant's mistake and didn't intend to investigate further. Shang Junlin sat beside Shin Yu. The palace servants quickly brought the lotus seed porridge over. "His Majesty, have some too." Shang Junlin picked up the porridge and finished it in a few bites. Shin Yu also put down the bowl and wiped her mouth with a handkerchief. The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Revenue is standing at the cusp of the storm. He hopes more than anyone that this is just an accident. After the palace servants finished cleaning up, Shang Junlin pulled Shin Yu's hand and walked to the bed. "You, sleep with me for a while." Shin Yu thought that he didn't sleep for most of the night and didn't refuse. After changing clothes, Shang Junlin hugged Shin Yu and lay down on the bed. "It's still more comfortable to stay with you." She was soft and fragrant when he hugged her. Even if he didn't do anything, Shang Junlin could hug her for a whole day. On the other side, in the study room with the doors and windows tightly shut, the middle-aged man asked in a deep voice, "How is the matter?" "Rest assured, my lord. I have already spread the news according to your request. When the sky is bright, everything will be as you wish." Chapter 97. Shin Yu lay in the man's warm arms and soon fell asleep. Shang Junlin looked down at him. He didn't feel sleepy at first, but after looking at Shin Yu's peaceful sleeping face for a while, he gradually felt sleepy. Not long after, Shang Junlin also fell asleep with him in his arms. After sleeping for a while, Shin Yu woke up feeling refreshed. He touched his side and found that Shang Junlin was not there. He must be busy with government affairs. Hearing the noise, Mushi came in to serve him. After washing up, Shinyu took a book and asked, "Did something happen? Your expression didn't look right when you came in." Mushi pursed her lips and didn't know if she should tell Shinyu. Shinyu rolled up the book and gently knocked on her head. "Tell me, what happened?" "It's outside. People are saying that you ordered someone to set the fire last night." Mushi was indignant. "You didn't do anything. How can these people slander you for no reason?" Shinyu restrained the smile on his face and sat on the soft couch with the book. "Tell me the details." "This morning, when I went out, I heard people secretly saying that there was something wrong with the fire last night. Someone deliberately set it to get rid of Miss Tan. Otherwise, why would Miss Tan's room catch fire among so many rooms? It was indeed man-made, but I don't know the real purpose of the person behind the scenes." Shinyu hid the deep thought in his eyes. It's not a big deal for them to talk about this, but for some reason, they all suddenly agreed that it was you who set the fire. They said it was because you couldn't tolerate other people around His Majesty, and Mushi couldn't continue. Shinyu picked up the teacup and took a sip. "Continue." "They said that His Majesty originally took a fancy to Miss Tan and wanted to bring her into the palace, but you refused. You even had a big fight with His Majesty and drove Miss Tan out. You also spread rumors to tarnish Miss Tan's reputation." Hearing this, Shinyu understood that the ultimate target of this fire was him. "Does His Majesty know?" Shinyu asked. "I found out early this morning. Before His Majesty left, he told us not to disturb your rest." "Didn't he tell you not to tell me about this?" "No." Mushi shook her head. "She only told us not to worry if you knew about it. Her Majesty will take care of it." "How many people think so now?" "Other than those who serve here, it's spreading everywhere else." When Mushi heard the rumors, he immediately went outside to inquire about the news. The more he heard, the angrier he became. "Young master, don't worry. His Majesty has already sent people to deal with it." Shinyu shook his head. "For this kind of thing, if we can't come up with a truth that is enough to convince them, it won't really stop. As the saying goes, 3 men make a tiger. Even if he didn't do it, the more people who talked about it, the more they would implicate him." This was probably one of the motives of the mastermind. Shinyu was right. Even though Shang Junlin ordered people not to talk about it in private, the rumors didn't disappear immediately. Instead, they spread more and more. Not only in the temporary imperial residence, but also in the capital. Shang Junlin received the secret message from the hidden dragon guards. His eyes were clouded and the air pressure around him was getting lower and lower. "Call the Tan family members over." Eunuch Meng didn't dare to delay. He called the Tan family members over as fast as he could. Official Tan and Miss Tan, who had just had ointment applied on her face, came over. "Have you heard the rumors outside?" Shang Junlin sat on the throne and said coldly. "Your Majesty, I am innocent." Official Tan knelt down in fear. "I don't know where the rumors came from. I can swear that I didn't do it. I don't know anything." Miss Tan knelt down silently and didn't say anything. "Is that so?" Shang Junlin's voice was indiscernible. "Then why did the rumors come from the servants of the Tan family?" "I really don't know. Your Majesty, please understand." Official Tan kowtowed heavily. There was only fear in his heart. When he heard the rumors, Official Tan's heart turned cold. Even if he was given 10 guts, he wouldn't have dared to spread such rumors. Everyone knew that Shingui Jun was His Majesty's most beloved person. Was he trying to court death by doing such a thing? Shang Junlin also knew that Official Tan didn't do it. Official Tan didn't have the guts to do it. He turned to look at one of the people involved. Did you notice anything wrong last night? This humble girl is certain that someone wants this humble girl's life. The lady, whose expression couldn't be seen clearly, suddenly raised her head. Last night, after I fell asleep, I vaguely felt that someone was walking around in the room. There was also a conversation that was suppressed. I didn't hear what they were saying. Not long after, the room was on fire. There is one more thing. I don't know if it counts. Before I fell asleep last night, an unfamiliar servant girl brought me a bowl of bloody swallow's nest. She said that my father saw that I was injured and specially sent someone to bring it to me. I felt that something was wrong, so I didn't eat the bowl of swallow's nest. I didn't dare to sleep too deeply at night. If she ate the swallow's nest and it happened to be drugged with sleeping pills, she would most likely have died in the fire. Shang Junlin ordered people to watch over the Tan family. There were many suspicious points in this matter, especially when it involved Xinyu. Shang Junlin couldn't remain rational. Your Majesty, don't frown. Xinyu reached out and smoothed out the wrinkles between the man's eyebrows. Shang Junlin took the opportunity to hug Xinyu. He buried his head in his neck and took a deep breath. I would rather they wanted to deal with me. His EU was so good that he didn't dare to hurt her in the slightest. Those people were bold and directly used such a vicious method to deal with him. The more Shang Junlin thought about it, the lower the pressure around him became. When he caught those people, he would definitely let them know what it meant to live a life worse than death. Xinyu stroked Shang Junlin's back. All right, Your Majesty, don't be angry. There is nothing to be angry about. It was just slander. What kind of words had he not heard before? When he worked for King Yu in his previous life, he had been scolded by all kinds of people. Compared to that, this was nothing. I won't allow them to talk about a Yu like that. A Yu is so good, how can I let them slander her? They don't deserve it. Xin Yu's heart warmed. She relaxed in the man's arms. Does Your Majesty know who did it? Shang Junlin didn't have many clues. Your Majesty, do you want to know who did it? Xin Yu blinked her eyes. A Yu knows. Shang Junlin raised his head and looked at him curiously. I don't know now, but I will know soon. Xin Yu smiled and whispered into Shang Junlin's ear. A Yu is really. Shang Junlin laughed. Your Majesty, just do what you need to do. As for the rest, you just need to lend me a few hidden dragon guards. This matter was not only limited to the officials on the surface, Shang Junlin had also instructed the hidden dragon guards to investigate. The Tan family was placed under surveillance, and every servant was interrogated. Their hard work paid off. They finally found a clue. The rumors became more and more intense. It was to the point where they could hear people talking about it everywhere they went. Everything is going according to your expectations. I believe that in time, your wish will come true. The subordinate complimented him. You have done well this time. After this matter is settled, the things that I promised you will belong to you. Thank you, Your Majesty. The subordinate was delighted. You may leave. Keep an eye on the situation outside. Yes. Imperial physician Gu and Gu Huai also heard the discussion about this matter. I believe that Your Majesty is not such a person. Imperial physician Gu had been in contact with Xinyu for a period of time. He trusted Xinyu's character. Brother is right. If Your Majesty really wants to deal with Miss Tan, why would he use such a stupid method? In the short period of time that they had spent together, Gu Huai clearly understood that Xinyu was not a fool who would do such a stupid thing because of jealousy. It is probably to sow discord between Your Majesty and Your Majesty. Your Majesty has been in the palace for so long and has always dominated Your Majesty. Your Majesty also dotes on Your Majesty and refuses to take in concubines. Those who want to send their daughters to stabilize their status can no longer sit still. Imperial Physician Gu sighed. I don't know if your majesty will believe your majesty. Those people don't think about it. If your majesty doesn't like them, what's the use of sending them into the palace? They will not get any benefits and will be implicated instead. Gu Huai was very disdainful of this kind of behavior that used women to gain status and power. It is a pity that some people are blinded by power and will never understand this point. Gu Huai nodded in agreement. The people behind the scenes wanted to wait until the day when Shen Yu would be neglected by Shang Junlin. Unfortunately, after waiting and waiting, Shen Yu and Shang Junlin got along as usual. Even Shang Junlin was more clingy than before because he was worried about Shen Yu. This was different from what he had imagined. When the people behind the scenes saw the news from their informants, they were so angry that they wanted to vomit blood. Darren, your majesty summons you. A servant's voice came from outside the room. He hurriedly put away the letter beside him and strode out of the room. When he arrived, he found that there was no one else except for Shang Junlin and Shen Yu. Your majesty, your majesty. Shang Junlin didn't say anything, so he could only kneel. Gradually, uneasiness surged in his heart. Darren E., I don't think there is much hatred between you and me, right? Shen Yu's calm voice broke the silence. Darren Yi's heart palpitated. I don't know what your majesty is talking about. Otherwise, why would Darren Yi commit arson and injure people and point all the evidence to me? Shen Yu looked at him calmly. The uneasiness in Darren Yi's heart gradually increased. He forced himself to remain calm and said, even if you are your majesty, you can't slander a court official. He did it very cleanly. Even if he gave himself away, he would only point all the evidence to Shen Yu. It would be impossible for him to be discovered. Whether it is the truth or slander, Darren Yi knows better than anyone else. If you don't want people to know, don't do it in the first place. Shen Yu stood up and walked in front of the kneeling man. Darren Yi has read so many books. Don't you understand this simple principle? It seems that Darren Yi still refuses to admit it. Shen Yu sighed in distress. Darren Yi is so confident that we won't be able to find any evidence. Darren Yi stiffened his neck and didn't speak. In fact, we won't be able to find anything. Who asked Darren Yi to personally send the evidence to us? The blood swallow's nest is such a precious tonic. Darren Tan would never give it to a concubine's daughter who brought shame to the family. Not every aristocratic family has the Yi family's background. Of course, one swallow's nest doesn't mean anything. What if we add this? Shen Yu took out a rolled-up piece of paper from his sleeve. There was a special pattern printed at the end of the paper. It was used by Darren Yi to send messages to the capital. How did you get this? Darren Yi reached out to take it, but Shen Yu withdrew his hand. Now you are willing to admit it. Chapter 98. Lord Yi's actions were tantamount to admitting Shen Yu's words. His expression changed again and again as he slowly retracted his hand. He had seen the seal on the paper very clearly. It was used to contact the people in the capital. The detailed arrangements to incite the people to slander Shen Yu were all sent to the people in the capital through this seal. Now that Shen Yu was holding one of them, did he have the other one as well? This was not the only thing he had written in the letter to the capital. There were many other things that could not be known by outsiders. Lord Yi's face turned ashen when he thought of the consequences if His Majesty found out. Do you admit to your crimes? Lord Yi, who had been immersed in his thoughts, was startled awake by the cold voice. He looked forward in panic. After a moment, he kowtowed heavily. I admit to my crimes. As expected, Shen Yu put away the letter in his hand and walked slowly back to Shang Junlin's side. He sat down. Why are you targeting me? As far as I know, the Yi family has no plans to send their children into the palace. After the incident with the tan girl, Shang Junlin had sent people to investigate which worlds had taken action. The Yi family was not among them. It could be said that the Yi family had never had such thoughts. Lord Yi was silent. Shen Yu cracked his fingers. Let me guess. It's because of Yi Jianming. Since there was no conflict of interest in the harem, he must have done something unfavorable to the Yi family elsewhere. Shen Yu searched his memories. This was the only thing that matched. Yi Jianming was stripped of his imperial results and will never be able to become an official. Your family spent a lot of effort to nurture him. Unfortunately, before he could do anything for the family, he was abandoned. You were unhappy and targeted me. Do you think that if I had not appeared at the Qianglin banquet, His Majesty would not have punished Yi Jianming? Shen Yu's every word pierced through Lord Yi's heart. He had never failed like this in his entire life. Yi Jianming was the child he valued the most. He liked him the most among the younger generation of the Yi family. Yi Jianming's intelligence was not inferior to others. He had high hopes for his successor, but because of a small matter, he was ruined. How could he take this lying down? After that incident, although Yi Jianming did not suffer any physical injuries, the child's mental state had undergone a huge change. He was muddle-headed all day long and did not look like a young master of an aristocratic family at all. As for the people who went to the Qianglin banquet with Yi Jianming, of course, he did not let them go. They were just some small family clans that relied on the Yi family. It would be easy to deal with them. Since Your Majesty and Your Highness already know everything, I have nothing more to say. Lord Yi slumped to the ground. Shen Yu was not surprised that they would make a move against Jiang Huiqing, who seemed to have no foundation at all. The imperial court was like this. It was always accompanied by mutual deception, open strife and covert struggle. Political opponents fought to the death. The imperial court seemed to be stable now, but it was the result of Shang Junlin's efforts to balance the situation. I want to know, how did Your Highness get the letter? The thing that made Lord Yi unable to quibble was the rolled-up letter that Shen Yu took out. He would only choose his most trusted subordinates to send letters. Once they found out, they would destroy the letter at all costs. No one else knew how the letter was sent. How did the letter end up in Shen Yu's hands? Lord Yi was puzzled. You're asking about this? Shen Yu's eyes swept downwards. What do you think? Lord Yi was taken away by the guards waiting outside. Before he left, he did not get a reply from Shen Yu. Of course, Shen Yu wouldn't tell him that he was the one who used the letter to scare him. A Yu's imitation skills are really good. Shang Junlin's hand reached into Shen Yu's sleeve and took out the letter that made Lord Yi's expression change greatly. His fingertips slid across her soft skin, causing her to tremble. Shang Junlin hugged Shen Yu from behind. Then, he wrapped his arms around her waist and stretched them forward to unfold the letter. If Lord Yi was here and saw the letter being unfolded, he would definitely scold them for being shameless. Besides the pattern that Shen Yu drew at the end of the letter, there was nothing else on the letter. In the beginning, they did not have any clue about the mastermind behind this incident. Later, Shang Junlin listened to Shen Yu's suggestion and asked the hidden dragon guards to secretly search for the mastermind behind this incident. They really caught the person who delivered the message. However, when the person realized that he had been discovered, he immediately destroyed the letter. The hidden dragon guards brought back the news and the destroyed letter. Shen Yu pieced together the pattern and created a similar letter. However, a fake letter was still a fake. If Lord Yi was not distracted by Shen Yu's words, he might have realized that something was wrong. Unfortunately, there was no if. The rumors in the capital have been controlled. Now that the mastermind has been found, it's time to deal with the situation in the palace. If Xinyu did not want to lure the mastermind out, Shang Junlin would not have allowed the rumors to circulate in the palace for so many days. How does your majesty plan to deal with this? Xinyu's wrist was held. The man's calloused fingertips caressed the inside of his wrist, causing him to feel numb. If it was in the past, Shang Junlin would definitely kill the person who spread the rumors. However, he knew that Xinyu did not like this. After a moment of silence, he asked, "How does you plan to deal with them?" Xinyu turned and looked at Shang Junlin. "Your Majesty can do whatever you want with the leaders. As for the rest of them, they will be fined 1 year's salary as a warning to others." The rumors disappeared as quickly as they appeared. In less than half a day, no one in the palace dared to talk about it anymore. As for the capital, Shang Junlin had already ordered people to suppress the rumors. The people in the capital were not as gullible as Lord Yi thought. After what Lord Yi had done spread to the capital, everyone was enlightened. I said before that Lord Yi would not do such a thing. Look, the results are out now. Lord Yi was indeed framed. This Lord Yi, could it be that he is related to Yi Jianming, who was jealous of a poor student and wanted to get his results revoked? They both have the surname Yi. What do you think? No wonder he wanted to slander Lord Yi. If it was not for Lord Yi, that poor student would have been bullied by others. His words were met with agreement. There were many aristocratic families in the capital, but there were even more ordinary people. These aristocratic families were used to being superior and thought that they were superior. The ordinary people did not have a good impression of them. Compared with the aristocratic families, they were more likely to bring in poor students. Not only this, have you forgotten that fraud was discovered in time before the imperial examination? It was Lord Yi who discovered it first. Lord Yi is so considerate. How could he kill a woman because of jealousy? When those words were first spread, I felt that something was wrong. Before Lord Yi entered the palace, His Majesty's harem did not have many women. After Lord Yi entered the palace, His Majesty said that he only wanted Lord Yi in this life. How could he like another woman in the blink of an eye and take her into his harem? If His Majesty really wanted to, his harem would have been full. A few years ago, the ministers did mention this matter. Don't you think it is suspicious? So there is no such thing as His Majesty taking in new people. Since there is no such thing, Lord Yi's jealousy and arson cannot be established. I have a cousin who works in an aristocratic family. Did you know that a few days ago, the aristocratic family was reprimanded by His Majesty? The reason was that a woman from an aristocratic family deliberately got close to His Majesty and was punished. The person who punished her was not Lord Yi, but His Majesty himself. At this point, everything that should be understood was clear. The cause and effect relationship was wrong from the beginning. Since this was the case, no matter how dignified the reason behind it was, it would not hold water. Restaurants and tea houses were all talking about this matter. Under the deliberate influence of some people, the wind quickly reversed. The truth is finally out. I knew that Brother Yu was not that kind of person. Jiang Huiqing heard the discussion downstairs and poured a cup of wine for himself. He Qingyu picked up the wine cup and took a sip. The relationship between His Majesty and Lord Yi is stronger than gold. It is not something that can be casually interfered with. That's right. I don't know what these aristocratic families are thinking. His Majesty has already made it clear that he will not fill up the harem, but they still don't stop. Since ancient times, wealth and power have moved people's hearts. What they want is the power behind His Majesty. The aristocratic family's appetite is getting bigger and bigger. Jiang Huiqing knew this as well. Only after stepping into the imperial court did he realize that the interior of the Great Huan dynasty was vastly different from what he had imagined. The seemingly stable exterior was only supported by a strong pillar. Once this pillar collapsed, it was only a matter of time before the Great Han dynasty collapsed. He also understood why His Majesty would put poor officials in important positions. It was not because he liked them, but because the court had been controlled by the aristocratic families for a long time. If there was no power to oppose them, the imperial power would become a joke sooner or later. Official E was sent back early, and the crimes he committed were also announced to the world. The Yi family's power in the capital was quickly divided up by other aristocratic families. The competition between aristocratic families is even worse than that between aristocratic families and poor families. If you think that they will be united, then you are gravely mistaken. Shin Yu put down a white piece. Under the shade of a tree, Shang Junlin and Shin Yu sat opposite each other. Between them was a red sandalwood chessboard. Shang Junlin had specially ordered the palace servants to find it in the storeroom. Shang Junlin held a black piece and put it down. In fact, the aristocratic families and the imperial family are not much different. In the previous dynasty, during the war, there was a saying that the aristocratic families are made of iron and the imperial family is flowing water. Before De Huan was founded, this land had experienced 100 years of war. It was not until De Huan was founded that the situation improved. Your Majesty, I am going to win. On the chessboard, as the last white piece was put down, the situation instantly reversed. The white pieces, which were originally at a disadvantage, quickly surrounded the black pieces and cut off all their escape routes. Shang Junlin threw back the piece in his hand and said crisply, I admit defeat. Your Majesty, you have lost today. You have to keep your word. Of course, I will not disturb you tonight. Shin Yu breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing that his body did not have any abnormalities after that time, Shang Junlin wanted to disturb him every time. He called it getting used to it. Shin Yu felt that he did not want to get used to this kind of thing. Your Majesty, Eunuch Meng walked over quickly with a rare look of panic on his face. Sun Zhao, official Sun wants to see you. Let him come in to see me. Eunuch Meng took the order and left. Not long after, a slightly embarrassed man in his 30s came in. Your Majesty, the north is suffering from a drought. Your Majesty, please send relief as soon as possible. Chapter 99. Subei was the name of several cities in the northern part of the Great Han dynasty. In the early years, Shang Junlin had left some men there to fight. Later, when he returned to the capital and shifted his focus, he did not completely let go. Officials like Sun Zhao were all arranged by him to stay in Subei. What's going on? Shang Junlin did not receive any news of the drought in Subei. Otherwise, he would not have stayed in the temporary imperial residence as if nothing had happened. Mu Shi, first serve official Sun a pot of tea. Shin Yu saw that Sun Zhao was travel-worn. It was obvious that he had rushed back. Sun Zhao was indeed thirsty. When Mu Shi brought the tea over, he did not refuse and directly drank it in one gulp. Only then did he slowly explain the situation in Subei. 3 months ago, it rarely rained in Subei, but at that time, it would occasionally rain a little. Subei has always been like this, so this subject did not take it to heart. Until a month ago, Subei began to have continuous sunny days. For a month, there was not a single drop of rain. The crops could not withstand the drought and died one after another. The people in Subei were short of food. This subject had no other choice but to take out a portion of the army's rations to help the people and send a memorial to the imperial court in hopes of receiving some assistance. Subei was an important pass in the northern part of the Great Han dynasty. If the Subei army was not stationed there all year round, it would be easy for the nomads to invade the Great Han dynasty. However, the living conditions in Subei were very bad. There was little rain and drought all year round. If the Subei army was not stationed there and the imperial court sent a batch of supplies there every year, it would be very difficult for ordinary people to survive. We did not receive your memorial. Shang Junlin's voice was cold. No one knew where the memorial requesting for disaster relief was now. This subject also guessed that the memorial might not have been delivered, so I rushed back. This subject returned to the capital without being summoned and is willing to accept punishment. Sun Zhao had been by Shang Junlin's side since before he ascended the throne. He naturally knew that Shang Junlin could not ignore Subei. There was only one possibility for him not to receive a reply from the imperial court after waiting for so many days. His memorial did not reach Shang Junlin's hands. Shang Junlin knocked on the stone table. This is an urgent matter. We will arrange for someone to go to Subei. You can go and rest first. This was his action when he was thinking. Before Sun Zhao came here, he was prepared to be condemned. His confidants had repeatedly advised him not to take the risk. If his memorial reached His Majesty's hands and nothing happened here, he would only end up not being able to return. Of course, Sun Zhao knew that he could afford to wait, but Subei couldn't. Neither the army nor the people of Subei could afford to wait. He took out the booklet that he had been keeping in his bosom. This subject has written down the disaster situation in Subei. Eunuch Meng took the booklet and presented it to Shang Junlin. We understand. Meng Chang, bring Lord Sun to the west courtyard. Don't spread what happened today. Your servant obeys. What do you think, Your Majesty? Shen Yu was not in the capital at this time in his previous life. He also fell seriously ill, so he did not know much about what happened this summer. As for the book he read after his death, it was written from Shen Qingran's perspective. The only description of this period of time was that he was bullied in the palace. Sun Zhao would not lie about this kind of thing. Not only Sun Zhao, but we also did not receive any memorials from any other officials in Subei. It seems that there is a big problem in Subei. If there is a problem with the officials in Subei, this matter is not as simple as just disaster relief. We will send the hidden dragon guards to investigate. As for the specifics, we will decide when the hidden dragon guards return. Shang Junlin flipped open the booklet. The more he read, the tighter his frown became. The disaster in Subei was more serious than expected. Starving people were everywhere, and people were swapping their children for food. Every scene was shocking. Shang Junlin was holding Shen Yu when he read the booklet. Shen Yu also happened to read the description on the booklet. When Sun Zhao wrote the booklet, he did not put too much personal emotion into it. He tried to write it as calmly and directly as possible. He only revealed a trace of emotion when he could not control it. It was precisely this kind of emotion that was revealed when he was suppressed to the extreme that could touch people's hearts. Your Majesty, let's arrange the disaster relief first. Otherwise, Subei would collapse on its own before the enemy attacked. Shang Junlin had already made a decision in his heart. He rested his head on Shen Yu's shoulder and rubbed his face against Shen Yu. We originally wanted to have fun here for a few days. After such a thing happened, they must return to the palace immediately. After all, there were many inconveniences in the temporary imperial residence. As long as I'm with Your Majesty, it's the same everywhere. Shen Yu rubbed against him back. That night, Shang Junlin ordered them to return to the capital ahead of time. The ministers also knew about the incident in Subei and packed up their belongings as quickly as possible. Early the next morning, the mighty group sped up and returned to the capital. Shen Yu sat in the carriage and lifted the curtain to look outside. They had only stayed in the temporary imperial residence for 20 days. If they returned now, the capital would still be very hot. After going down the mountain, the temperature gradually increased. Shen Yu changed into thin clothes and put a small basin of ice in the carriage, but she still felt very hot. The first half of August was one of the hottest periods in the capital. Originally, they would stay in the temporary imperial residence until the end of August and return when the capital was not so hot. However, their plan could not keep up with the changes. After such a big incident in Subei, they could only return to the capital ahead of time. The ministers did not dare to complain. They all knew the importance of Subei. Compared to temporary enjoyment, they certainly wanted long-term stability. They did not want to experience the turbulent situation when the previous emperor was on the throne again. The capital received the news early. The Ministry of Revenue prepared disaster relief materials according to Shang Junlin's decree. When the large group returned to the capital, the Ministry of Revenue had already taken care of everything. Although the Minister of Revenue was very stingy when the Minister of Works asked for money, when it came to disaster relief, he would not hesitate to spend more money. Shang Junlin summoned the ministers for a meeting, so Shen Yu returned to Yuzhang Palace. Even if the master was not there, everything in Yuzhang Palace was the same as before. Shen Yu looked at the pots of flowers that were growing well and sat by the window. Did something like this happen in his previous life? How was it resolved in the end? In that book, Shen Qingran's incident in the Imperial Palace was only briefly mentioned. Shen Yu could only recall the memories of his previous life over and over again. It was already 9 months later when he recovered from the serious illness. It was said that the tyrant killed many ministers and his reputation among the people fell a step. What about before that? His memories seemed to be covered by a layer of fog. He could not see clearly. Gongzi, do you want to try the new snacks made by the kitchen? Mu Shi's words pulled Shen Yu's thoughts back. Shen Yu looked at the colorful glass bowl that Mu Shi was holding. What is it? I heard that it was inspired by Miss Shen Yu. It was made with fresh fruits and small ice cubes. Knowing that Gongzi likes sweet things, they also added honey in it. Shen Yu was curious about the snacks made of ice cubes. Let me see. The bowl was only the size of a palm. When it was close, Shen Yu found that the bowl was transparent. It was just that the color was darker and could not be seen from a distance. This bowl. Shen Yu took the bowl in his hand. His fingertips touched a piece of ice cold. In the bowl, there were fine ice cubes and small pieces of various fruits. Under the droplets of water that had not yet fallen, they were bright and juicy. They looked very appetizing. This glass bowl is a newly made product. It is said that it was made according to Shen Yu's recipe. I heard that Miss Shen Yu has a whole set of transparent and colorless bowls. It is just that the shape is very strange. It must be the glass that Shen Yu mentioned before. Shen Yu took a spoonful of fruit and put it into his mouth. It was cold when it entered his mouth. The freshness of the fruit did not decrease because of the coldness. Instead, it had a different taste. Moreover, it was cold and very comfortable to eat. It is indeed a pleasure to eat such snacks in summer. Go and ask the kitchen to make more. I will send some to His Majesty later. Unconsciously, Shen Yu had finished a whole bowl of snacks. He was somewhat unsatisfied, but he also knew that his body did not allow him to eat more. Yes. After eating some ice drinks, Shen Yu was not as agitated as before. He simply took a pen and paper and painted aimlessly. Shen Yu was proficient in zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. In his previous life, in order to better help the King of Yu, he learned everything that he could. No matter how much Count Jinbei did not care about him, the son of the first wife, he still found a teacher to teach him the things that the children of aristocratic families should learn because it involved the face of the Count Jinbei's family. No matter how unwilling concubine Ru was, she could not disobey Count Jinbei's decision. Later, in order to win over the reclusive great scholars, Shen Yu put in a lot of effort and learned these things to the extreme. Although he was reborn, the things that he learned in his previous life were still deeply imprinted in his mind. Outside the window, birds were chirping. Inside the room, the young man in blue was sitting by the window and concentrating on painting. The painting paper covered the table. Shang Junlin approached with light footsteps. He did not want to disturb this scene. On the rice paper, there were a large number of scattered peach blossoms. It seemed to be without any order, but if one looked carefully, one could see the abundant spring in it. "When did your majesty come?" Shen Yu put down the pen and saw Shang Junlin standing by the table. "Why didn't you call me? Look at how serious you are painting. Ayu's peach blossoms are very beautiful." The ink was not dry, so Shang Junlin could only look at it in a flat position. "I just painted a little." Shen Yu rubbed his wrist and stood up. He looked at the sky. He had been painting for almost 2 hours. Shang Junlin consciously walked over and rubbed Shen Yu's wrist. He was very good at doing this. Today, the small kitchen made some new snacks. They taste very good. "Your Majesty, do you want to try some?" Shen Yu asked Mu Shi to go to the small kitchen and get some snacks. Shang Junlin did not have a strong appetite. After Shen Yu entered the palace, he tasted a lot of new foods with Shen Yu. He knew how good Shen Yu's tongue was. Anything that could be praised by him must be delicious. Mu Shi brought over 2 glazed bowls, one big and one small. Shen Yu looked at the big bowl in front of Shang Junlin and the small bowl in front of him. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Mu Shi, it's not good to side with Her Majesty so openly, right? Young master, don't make fun of this servant. Imperial physician Goose said that you should eat less food that is too cold." A small bowl was the limit. Although Shang Junlin spoiled him, when it came to Shen Yu's health, he insisted on his principles more than anyone else. Shen Yu saw that it was hopeless to change the small bowl to the big one, so he focused on eating in his bowl. Shang Junlin found it funny. "Your Majesty, why do you keep looking at me?" Shen Yu looked up and saw that Shang Junlin kept looking at him. The fruit in his bowl did not decrease much. He sighed in his heart. If he did not eat, he could give it to him. Shang Junlin slowly fed him a mouthful of fresh fruit. His eyes did not leave Shen Yu throughout the whole process. The man's eyes were burning, as if he was not eating fruit, but something delicious. The man's eyes lingered on his face and lingered on his lips for a long time. Shen Yu was restless under his gaze. The coldness in his mouth could not alleviate the heat that kept surging up. Shen Yu's bowl was empty. He felt uneasy under the increasingly hot gaze, so he got up and wanted to leave. The sudden force from his wrist dragged him back. Before he could react, the man in his arms had already kissed him. Something cold was passed into his mouth. "Ayu, is it delicious?"